Mr. Chairman, we're good to go.
We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Let's start with a roll call of the members.
Representative Bear.
Here.
Representative Burkhart.
He is excused.
Representative Duncan. Representative Ayer. Representative Gray. Representative Heiner. Representative Sherwood. Representative Western. Chairman Greer.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. All right, committee, thank you for being here. Members of the public, thank you for being here. Let me go over a few rules that will follow within the Minerals Committee. We do try to adhere strictly to formalities. We've found over time that it helps deal with emotions. It helps us have a productive discussion, which is why we are here today. So one of those things is when you come forward to testify, it will make sure we can hear you in the microphone. State your name, where you're from, and then we'll get your testimony. And so when address me, Mr. Chairman or Representative Greer is fine. What we try to do is work through the chair. So being that if, for example, if Representative Heiner had a question, he'd say, Mr. Chairman, I'd recognize him. He would ask whoever's testifying a question. Person answering would go, Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner. Sounds awkward, but trust me, it really does help with a smooth, and it takes some of the emotion out of the dialogue. We're not here to argue with one another. We are here to discuss very important issues. So with this special session, we, as the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee, have been assigned 3 bills, all dealing with private mandates. We have before us House Bill 1001. We also have House Bill 1009 and House Bill 1005. It is my intent as the chairman is for us to work and pass one bill out to the chamber for that discussion. But as is done, oftentimes, rather than go through each one of the bills, knowing the nature of the passion of folks regarding these issues, what we're going to do is take public testimony, and I'll take testimony in this way: is if there are any legislators in the audience, which I do not see, I'd give them preference. I don't see. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Banks. Okay. If there are any agencies, and is there anyone from Workforce Services here that I don't recognize? Okay. So with that, hopefully everyone signed up for the list. Can I we've got the list here. Can I visually just get who all intends or wishes to testify? Okay. So with that in mind, what I'll ask is that, and again, and I've spoken to some 400 people in my community. There are a lot of stories with this. So what we're going to ask is come up, we'll try to keep it limited to 3 minutes. If we got an exchange or questions asked from the committee, we'll go by that. But just try to move along with the testimony. How do I say this? We've already, we've all heard a lot already coming in. Okay, so what we need from you is what's really important, and try to be succinct with that and to the point. To the extent that you have any amendments or changes to any one of the bills, please call that out to us, any suggestions, and let us know. This is one, in my opinion, this is the best committee in the legislature. We have a broad group of people here, primarily business folks. Or maybe they're all business. Sorry, everybody's in business, except for the retired ones, Representative Bear. Sensitive to all of the issues that are associated with this. So with that, I'm gonna kind of punch down this list And so I've got, and of course I don't read well. What is that? Jacob. Okay, Jacob Power? Yep. Oh, no, I don't. We're going to take public testimony on all three of the bills, which are to prohibit private mandates, and then the committee will work those. So, yeah, Jacob, if you want to come forward, introduce yourself. Yes, yeah, we'll get through this together. I know a lot of folks haven't been here before. I'm used to dealing with folks that testify an awful lot. So come up, push the button, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from.
I guess that works right there.
It has a green light at the bottom. You got it?
Oh, very good. Not technologically advanced.
I'm not either, but I know green and red.
My name is Jacob Power.
Okay.
I am from Worland,
A
Wyoming.
little bit closer to your microphone.
Is that better?
Is that coming through?
Is that better?
I don't think you're coming through, Jacob.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. All right.
I'll get really close. How's
Okay. Go ahead, Jacob.
that? My name's Jacob Power. I am from Worland, Wyoming, and I work at Banner Health Washakie Medical Center. What I wanted to speak to you about today was personal experience that I have had. I have been called into my manager's office on more than one occasion. And it was quite an interesting experience because during that time, they were asking me my intentions with the vaccine mandates. Do I intend to take a vaccine, or do I intend to seek some kind of an exemption? I simply told them at that point in time that they do not have the right to ask me that, as that is my personal decision, and they moved on. They called me into the office again a different time because they asked the same exact question. I responded with them that I will seek an exemption. Also made it clear again that they do not have the right to ask me that kind of question. I have, my other colleagues have also told me where their stance is. The ones that either have the vaccine or have an exemption already approved, they're never called into the office. The reason I find this interesting is because these people, the employers, the managers, people that are working above me, they have no right to look into my medical record without my permission. But that's exactly what's happening. This has also happened to another one of my colleagues, regardless of their stance. I know of two people inside of the facility that have given me permission to not use their names, however, to say that they have sought religious exemptions. They are religious people, and they are getting their exemptions denied. This is discrimination. This is coercion. This is invasion of privacy. What I wanted to do today was to ask you, with the entirety of all of the bills, is to strike down this mandates in its entirety, as it does go against, from what I do believe and from what I have read in the Constitution of Wyoming and of this country, it goes against it in entirety.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Powers? Go ahead, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Powers, thank you for being here. You just mentioned something that I just kind of wanted to expound upon. You said that religious exemptions were denied. Could you just give us a little idea how you know that they were denied, and if you know why?
So if I may, I'm going to point to my colleague. She's going to speak on this. She can give you more details on that. They are denied because they are not sincerely held according to whoever it is that approves these. The question then does become, who has the authority to determine if me or you has a sincerely held belief? Representative Bear.
Let's go Representative Duncan, then Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Powers, what position do you don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable, but what do you do for Banner?
I am a radiologic technologist, X-ray and CT.
Representative Western. Same question. Yeah. Same position my daughter has over in Scotts Bluff. I couldn't get her to come to Orland to work. It's a shame. Okay, thank you, Mr. Powers. All right, I've got Lorena Stewart next. Yep. I'm just going to kind of go down the list because I see sort of Banner Health's like right in the middle of the list, so it'll be perfect for that.
Hello. Can you hear me? I'm extremely nervous and do not like doing this sort of thing, so please,
My goal in life is to make you nervous, okay?
it would not take much today.
All right.
Where do I even start? Okay, so Lorena Stewart, from Moreland, Wyoming. I work for Banner Health, and I also, like Jacob, am a multimodality radiology tech. I've been a tech for 17 years, and my biggest thing, I know you all probably want some things that we would like for you all to do during these bills. And one of my biggest thing is that, so I was one of the ones that did get a religious exemption denial. And it's almost laughable to me because of the fact that I've been a born again Christian since the age of 8. And anyone that knows me knows that. I mean, I think everybody was shocked when they heard that mine got denied. But that just kind of goes to the point that for years, all I've had to do for like flu exemptions and that sort of thing, check a box, submit it, send it in, no questions asked. So it really bothers me and has bothered me from the get-go when they put this mandate down that they all of a sudden decided to change the exemption forms. You know, even medical even has become, 4 pages long now. So just a physician signing off stating that their patient should not have or should not get a certain vaccination is not enough anymore. So now it has to be sent through some clerical person and who knows, Timbuktu somewhere. And they just basically either say yes or no without knowing you, not knowing if you have a, sincere religious belief, knowing nothing about you, how they can just deny it on no basis. And so when I got my denial letter, it basically said no sincerely held belief. Period. It was like a form letter that they sent to me. And so I would like if there's some way to make that the exemption process just be back to simple how it used to be. I mean, to me, that's huge. And that's been a big pressure for all of the other employees, my other colleagues that have wanted to put forth a religious or medical exemption, that now it's like the form, you feel like you need to hire an attorney just to fill it out. It's just ridiculous. And we know, because we get the feeling from being there that, they want us to jump through these hoops. They didn't want it, make it easy. They didn't want to say, well, we'd like for you to have the vaccine, but yet here are your other options also. It was not presented like that to us. And so that's the biggest thing that has been so disheartening to us and really disappointing, because I loved working for Banner Health, up until a couple months ago when all this came down. They're wonderful, probably the best company I've ever worked for, actually. And I've told a lot of my friends and family members, I've never had a company that I really enjoyed working for this much before this, but it's completely changed the atmosphere. And another thing is that, so along with the exemption process, and I know in some of these bills, and there were so many I read, so can't remember specifically if this one did, but natural immunity. So it's been very evident to us, especially in our radiology department at Washakie, that we almost hate to say that we're thankful that we all got COVID last year, but we all did and recovered and are doing fine. So then this new surge that coincidentally started becoming very overwhelming after the push for these mandates. We're the only department in the entire hospital that has not been short-staffed, that has not had to hire and bring more and have others come to help. And even some of the senior executive people have had to go and help in some of the other departments. We are the only department that has not had that issue because we all recovered from COVID last year. So it's almost like our own little clinical trial within the walls of our hospital, because of the fact that we are right in direct patient care all day, every day. We're on call. One of us is working 24, for the hospital there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So in that time, there's not been a single one of us that have been sick, have had to miss days, but yet every other department there has been. So within that kind of little thing that we see, almost like an experiment within our hospital, we're good. We're almost like bulletproof. We feel that way. We talk that way because we're around the COVID patients. Our employees in other departments are around the same patients, but yet they're all having to call out sick. Some of them even wind up in our ER. So I would really, really like for something about natural immunity as one of the exemptive processes to be put in there. I know some of the bills mention kids, and I know all that's kind of coming down the pike now with the kids getting pushed for vaccines. And it just worries me so much because I know the heart of most parents, and especially in the state of Wyoming. And I remember watching a committee meeting where Pastor Clem said something about he has had to deal with so many people, like normal, sane individuals, that he's having to talk off the ledge now because they're talking about doing really insane things. Well, I feel like if something is not done specifically to protect the children, I think things could get violent, which would not be good. And then I just want to remind everyone that individual rights should be so much more important than these corporations and businesses. We're the ones that voted for you. We may not be the ones putting money in your pocket, because I hear a lot of stories about different companies lining pockets of politicians, specifically ones that might be in this room. And that bothers me. And so I want to investigate that more. And I just want to implore that you remember that our Constitution is more about our individual rights than these corporate business rights. We should supersede that. That's it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stewart, thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking some time to be here in front of us. You mentioned that you were denied your opportunity to be exempted. Is there a process in place to appeal that decision or get more clarification for the reasons of that exemption? Or is it just closed at that point?
There is not. So I almost hate to bring this up because I know that my case is special. And so, I mean, if anything, it shows maybe some discrimination on their part. But I actually, when I resubmitted my form, because we have had several that have got the religious denials, resubmitted it. I've heard, and I don't know this for sure, but one girl that I know resubmitted twice, and either the second or the third time. Anyways, it then finally got approved. But that just takes me back to the whole thing of it shouldn't be like a denial approval process. I've never, in anywhere that I've ever worked in my almost 20 years in the healthcare field, it was never like a denial process. It's okay, you have a religious exemption or medical exemption if you have it signed off by a doctor, and that's it. You submit it. End of story. You're compliant. And then there's accommodations, when you choose not to have the vaccines, and that's fine. We've always gone along with those accommodations. That's not a problem. The masking and stuff like that. That's not a problem. It's just the fact that they even have the right to deny us something now that is a American right. As far as I've ever known, this has never been an issue before, ever, for me in healthcare.
Follow up.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned also that you had the COVID illness. Do you
Yes, sir.
have any way of proving that with written documentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
Well, this-
thank you.
I'm being gentle.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just easier. Go ahead. So go ahead and answer that question.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. We appreciate you coming. I will say this, so in defense of, and I'm going to say for almost all state legislators, we are all here because we care about our communities. Our pockets aren't getting lined. It costs us to be here.
I like to
And we're
think
here
that.
because we care about you
That's what I want
and
to think.
everybody else.
Mhm. This is only new information.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now have Lance Porter on the list. Is Lance available? Sure. Okay. So this is, you'll introduce who you have. Okay, go ahead, Mary Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mary Lynn Shickich, and I'm here today representing Banner Health, which has 4 hospitals in Wyoming: Casper, Worland, Wheatland, and Torrington. With me, I'll let the gentleman introduce themselves. I'm just by way of,
You're not coming through the microphone, right?
can you hear me?
Yeah, just pull it closer. I
You
think.
bet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Lynn Shickich, representing Banner Health, which has 4 hospitals in Wyoming: Wyoming Medical Center, Worland, Wheatland, and Torrington. It's a private nonprofit company that has 52,000 employees throughout 6 states. In Wyoming, there are 1,629 employees, and as of today, 160 have not been in compliance. So the regulations are such that they will be able to stay employed until the end of November. There's a process, which I'd be happy to discuss if asked, about how that is handled. In Worland, for example, there are 7 employees who have not yet met the mandate or the requirements. 84 have been vaccinated and 16 have received exemptions. Allowed others here to discuss specifically about how the process works, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And then with your permission, Mr. Chairman, we would like to suggest a couple of amendments to House Bill 1.
Okay, why don't we do this? Just hear from the gentlemen that are with you if they have comments. So introduce yourself and then we'll listen to any proposed amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Lance Porter. I'm the CEO of Banner Wyoming Medical Center. And if I could, I'd like to just appreciate my colleagues who have shared their feelings. I've heard many of the same things from the employees that work for me at Wyoming Medical Center, and try to provide for my employees the why behind some of these processes that we have in place. We have repeatedly gone to our employees to ask what their intention is in regards to the vaccine mandate. And the reason for that is because we are an operation that the community relies on to be open 24/7. And we need to have a contingency plan for those who choose not to continue to work or get a vaccination. We have that obligation to make sure we can staff the beds and make sure we have the providers to provide that care is the reason for that, just simply. And also the religious exemption process. That is a difficult one. Right now there is a single organization within Banner Health that reviews all of those. The alternative was to have that done at 29 different locations, being maybe interpreted differently. And so we had a single organization that was reviewing and approving those. So those were done in a consistent manner. At first it was called a religious exemption, but more and more it has been strongly held beliefs. I don't have insight onto why some were approved and some were not. That would come down into how they express their strongly held beliefs. I've been involved in healthcare. I've worked in hospitals my entire career. I got into healthcare both as a clinician as well as an administrator to help other people. I guarantee you that anybody that works in healthcare got into it to help other people, regardless of where you fall on that vaccine mandate. We want to help people. Currently, in my role as a CEO, my job is not only help people, but to protect the patients that come to my hospital and to protect the employees that are providing that care. And I feel that the reason that we are proposing this vaccine mandate is to be able to provide that vaccination status. We have patients who have requested only nurses that are vaccinated to provide the care because they want that protection, protect our other patients that are there, and to protect our employees. The problem that we face is when you are unvaccinated and you're exposed outside of work or you get COVID, you're out of the fight. And we want to make sure that our employees are in the fight and can care for those patients, the reason they got into healthcare. Last week, we had a census of 206 patients. That is the highest we've ever had at Wyoming Medical Center. Of those, 87 were COVID positive. Of those, 7 were unvaccinated or were vaccinated. So the far majority were unvaccinated. So again, we see that vaccinations, exemption process, and testing are tools that we have to make sure that we keep our patients safe and our colleagues safe so that we can stay in the fight and continue to provide care 24/7. And again, we can talk a little bit later about amendments to Bill number 1001, but I would appreciate your time and ask if you have any other questions.
Any questions for Mr. Porter? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Porter, I'm not understanding how a religious exemption could be denied because ultimately that's between an individual and God. So, I mean, I can you expand upon how on earth a religious exemption could be denied?
Mr. Porter, go ahead. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I cannot because I have not read every single exemption. That would be, as we talk about invasion of privacy and, people strongly held belief. That's why it is one organization that's reviewing these and approving these. I would imagine it has to do with something that has to do with how they express themselves or, but there's a litmus test. There is a barrier to make sure that people are not just avoiding it because again, it is a tool that we have to make sure that our patients are safe.
Representative Gray, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had moments where I've had sincerely held beliefs, but haven't done a great job of expressing myself. So how can you say that the quality of how someone expresses themselves is determinant on whether you're going to grant an exemption? It has nothing to do with whether you hold a belief strongly.
Go ahead, Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, people have their strongly held beliefs, and sometimes it's hard to express those on a piece of paper. But again, the position of Banner Health has been that vaccines are the best way to protect our patients. And so our efforts have been on to encourage people as much as possible to get those vaccines so that they can, number one, stay healthy themselves, so they can stay in the fight and continue to treat our patients. And number two, to protect their colleagues and to protect their patients. Right now, like I said, when somebody is unvaccinated and they are exposed, they're out of the fight for 10 to 14 days. Those shifts, that burden then goes on to those that are vaccinated and stay in the fight. That's where COVID fatigue comes from. And so there has to be that barrier. There has to be that encouragement for those who sit on the fence one way or the other to become vaccinated, because really we feel that that is the best way to protect our patients and our staff.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Porter, if someone submits an application for an exemption and it's denied, and then they decide to resubmit it, does that resubmittal go to the exact same department and the same person that denied that exemption to start with?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Sorry. We have legislators going different directions right now, as everybody is. So any other questions for Mr. Porter? What's that?
He's waiting to answer.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
I was
Chairman.
distracted. I apologize.
If I remember the question correctly, it was if somebody is denied, does it go back to the same committee? I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question at this time, but I can find out and would be more than happy to get back to you on that.
Okay. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a procedural question. So previous to vaccinations, previous to COVID, previous testimony just stated that she was able to religious exempt herself from a flu vaccine and it was a checkbox. So did these new forms come in after COVID? And is it a short answer essay type for religious exemption versus just a checkbox as it was before?
Go ahead, Mr. Porter.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like my colleague, Dr. Andy Dunn, to address that.
Okay, good. It's Doctor?
Yes, sir.
Yep, Dr. Dunn, go ahead. Introduce yourself and answer
You
questions.
betcha. Thank you. My name is Andy Dunn, former chief of staff at Wyoming Medical Center, now chief of primary care. Been leading the COVID response in the inpatient and outpatient setting for 18 months now. Seems like the world's been tilting on a different axis since that whole time. In going back, if I can merge your question with Representative Gray's question, it's very layered. It's very complicated in that with the new vaccine, a lot of people didn't, there are a lot of information that wasn't true, that wasn't consistent with what was in the actual vaccine. For instance, if someone, due to religious beliefs, did not want to have pork in any type of the vaccination, then that's a case where they can write that down as opposed to just a simple check mark, because we know at the EUA that there's still more to be publicized about what's in the vaccine and to educate everyone about the vaccine. Also, fetal tissue. where was that with the mRNA vaccines versus the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca? So there's so many different types of vaccine and does it change your DNA? And there's some religious questions with that, different. And so that's why there's more to write in that box. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Porter, thank you for being here. You made a great argument about how you want to stay in the fight, keep your employees in the fight so you can protect and provide the services that you are to provide. There's been studies that have come out that make it pretty clear that natural immunity is superior to vaccinated immunity. And so I'm just want to know, are you making efforts to increase the natural immunity of your employees, for instance, making sure they're sleeping well, that they're eating right, that they're exercising? Do you do those things as well to mitigate the dangers to your customers and to your fellow employees?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, this might be a question that might be better answered by a physician in terms of a part of that. But yes, every Banner Health hospital has a wellness program where you are encouraged to eat well, to get exercise, to sleep well. Throughout this pandemic, we have made counselors available. We call it the second victim, are the nurses and the doctors that actually see somebody die. And so we have provided counselors to help see them through that stress and look for mental health and well-being as well as physical.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're requiring a vaccine, but you're not requiring these other prohibitive measures. Is that right?
So the wellness program is voluntary.
Committee, any Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Porter, this is kind of follow up to Representative Bear's question. Do you allow antibody test as grounds for exemption?
Go ahead, Mr. Porter.
Mr. Chairman, if it's possible, I'd like to defer this question to my physician colleague.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. And if I could actually merge the two questions that were just brought up. Natural immunity is absolute immunity and to fight the virus. Thing about it is we have asymptomatic, mild, moderate, severe disease. So for those that have asymptomatic or mild disease may not have that natural immunity as long as, say, someone with moderate to severe disease that had a longer fight, so to speak, of the virus that produced more antibodies and a greater immune response. And so the immunity in several different studies has been shown to the antibodies last a little bit longer than the asymptomatic or mild disease. And going back to your question with the seropositive surveillance, at this time, it's not recommended and was several different reasons. Not to get too nerdy, but when you talk about IgM and IgG, IgM is an antibody that's elicited in the first part of the immune response, and somewhere between 7 and 14 days after you start showing signs of symptoms, and then it abates thereafter. But then IgG is another antibody that can persist for years, actually. But there's no correlation at this time between the IgG response and your immune system's ability to recognize a new variant or even the same variant and fight it off effectively. But we've learned about the spike protein and the nucleic acids and binding of the ACE2 receptor. And this thing it's a horrible machine, this virus. And there's so many different mechanisms that we're still working through and trying to figure out. And we don't have those specific antibodies, hopefully in due time. But right now, the IgM and IgG antibodies are not recommended for serial surveillance. Because clinically, what do we do with that? So let's say if someone comes and they're IgM positive, do you let them go back to work? But if that's day 8 of their symptoms, then they could be potentially shedding the virus. And so that doesn't mean they have immunity. And that means that they're still actively infected. So as clinicians, we kind of have to think through the process of when did the symptoms start? And there's just, and is it cross-reactive with any other coronaviruses? And there's just so much to it, unfortunately. So hopefully in due time, that'll be further developed. But right now, it's not recommended.
Mr. Porter, I have a question of the committee. Is the committee done? Questions? So I've struggled with this with day one being in Moreland And so I don't understand how our healthcare workers were able to care for everybody in July of last year when we had a pretty strong surge. Okay, they were able to care for people by using personal protective equipment, safety measures. We have exemptions for people that if they're able to qualify for them. So I assume they're using those same measures. So we're down to a handful of people in Orleans, what I understood from what was said earlier. Why is it that they can't receive a reasonable accommodation and keep their job and continue to be a member of my community and help care for the members of my community?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that question. I was in Casper in November when we had that surge. I had just joined Wyoming Medical Center and was there to help manage that last surge. I think one of the differences between then and now is that back then, there were different tools. We didn't have vaccines available to us. That really came out. The big effort started in December and January of our healthcare workers and our over 65. And I think since then, the numbers have proven out, especially just looking at what I see at the hospital every day, that unvaccinated patients are more likely to end up in the hospital, end up in the ICU, and end up on ventilators, which overloads our hospital and makes it harder for us to care for everybody. So back then we didn't have that tool. Now we do, and we're seeing that it does have an impact. And so our effort has been to promote vaccination for as many employees as we possibly can. And to date, we have been able to get 75% of the hospital employees are vaccinated, 80% of our clinic employees are vaccinated. So there are very few that are not watching these proceedings now. But again, I think what we like is a toolkit. So vaccines, exemptions, regular testing. And I think Mary Lynn, my colleague, would like to talk about some of the amendments we'd like to make to Bill 1001 that would help us to accomplish all these things.
So, Mr. Porter, I still, I understand there's another tool and there's a difference between promote and mandate. You agree with me on that? But those patients that have exemptions, what are you doing? Or those employees that have exemptions, I assume they're using, you have safety measures in place that allow them to continue to work, correct?
That is correct.
Why can those same measures not be used for those that don't have an exemption?
So everybody at the hospital follows standard precautions, whether you're vaccinated or not. Everybody masks. Everybody is temperature checked as you walk in the hospital. We make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can. For those that receive exemptions, they still have to mask. They have to do everything that they can. In addition, they were required to do regular testing as well to make sure that when they walk in the door, we are as certain as possible that they are not, that they do not have COVID. And so, we will require additional steps for those people that have exemptions. And again, I think that we would be willing to entertain some changes to this one that would allow those people to stay in the fight, but allow them to get testing and make that work. But again, the word mandate was because at the time, there was no legislative opposition, and we felt that this was absolutely necessary for our employees to provide as best coverage and protection as they could, because we feel that is the best way to keep our patients and our staff safe.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dunn, did you have individual comments or further and briefly? Because we have other people need to testify. And doctors speak makes my head spin. I'll just be honest with you.
Well, fair enough. The Delta variant, one person can infect up to 5 to 9 people. It's that contagious. And so it's not only for the employees, but it's for the high risk population that we serve, the advanced age, the people on chemotherapy. And so it's a protective measure because we're in a high risk situation.
Okay. So Mary Lane, you had some amendments you wanted to, or some suggestions you wanted for the committee, and we'll be more than happy to jot those down and follow
Thank you,
along.
Mr. Chairman. I think a member of your committee may have a copy of those and can speak to this as well. We'd appreciate on House Bill 1 that you would give some consideration to page 7, line 3.
Just give the committee a second so they can
Yes.
get there. Okay, go ahead.
We would ask you to please insert the following sentence, and after I give it to you, I'll explain. An employer that promulgated a COVID-19 vaccine requirement prior to the effective date of this act is not subject to the delayed date prescribed in this section. I'd be happy to make copies available. Essentially, that particular section of the law holds a period of 60 days before you can continue with this program. And as has been testified here today, we absolutely will comply to every requirement that's in the law that you all pass, if you should choose to pass one. We just like the opportunity to continue to test employees who do not meet the requirement so that we can try to keep people as safe as we can. And this, as I understand it, not strictly related to our Banner Health, but there are other employers in the state who also have programs in place. So this would just allow us the opportunity. It's not saying that anybody that doesn't have a program can go ahead and wait that period, but allow us to continue complying with all the laws that you pass related to it.
So I guess the question I have is, do you think 101, which is going to get worked all the way through a long system, do you feel right now that it prevents employers from testing on November 1?
Legal counsel reviewed it and did express some concern that that puts a delay in the program until that time period that it's effective, yes. And we'd be more than happy if you think differently, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman. But that was the understanding from a legal review of the bill.
You know, I have 150 employees and we're taking reasonable precautions to protect them, but we're not mandating testing or mandating vaccination. But testing is in our arsenal, and I don't believe that this prohibits that. So, okay, but good point. Clear law is good law. Okay, what's your next point?
Mr. Chairman, we also, with regard to the question about the COVID antibodies, on page 5
Yep.
and page 6, it is related to the use of the blood test for the COVID antibodies. We think that this bill essentially is a vaccine or testing, and that particular item in there isn't, as we understand it, necessarily to this bill. And so it's really extraneous. It's part of the opportunity that employer can use, but it isn't necessarily required.
Yeah, we've got a drafting correction there. You know, the bill is put together with some placeholders for discussion points. And I think we'll see some amendments to clear that out. State your concern one more time so we all understand it
With
clearly.
your permission, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask Dr. Dunn to explain this more specifically with regard what we think would be more appropriate.
Okay, we're listening. Go ahead, Dr. Dunn.
I'll be quick. The seropositive examination isn't, we can't clinically correlate it. So I would recommend that we look at either removing that or putting in some other form of surveillance like PCR that you can test for asymptomatic patients as well as symptomatic patients for active infection, if that's the goal of that paragraph. But the looking at antibodies is clinically very, very gray area, difficult to clinically correlate.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I guess my name's on the bill, so I'll tell you what we were trying to have a place marker for was natural immunity is another component of that. I also agree that the antibody test is not very not very accurate. So, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, are we to comment on all bills now or just this particular one? Because of similar concerns with House Bill 9 as well in terms of the dates in it, but I would be happy to just give
I
that.
think for right now, let's just worry about House Bill 1. And we're going to try our best to bring some of the other items into it and have one bill out. So, okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do also want to just say that we understand every employee and the problems this is potentially causing them. And we know it's individual in each case. The company Banner Health is really committed to promoting and keeping good health. And it was really in the spirit of trying to protect employees and patients in doing this. Thank you.
Banner Health is necessary in my community. It means something. So I need to treat people in my community well, and including those employees in my community. I'm serious about it. So, okay. All right. Thank you. Next, we have Janine Jones. Please state your name, where you're from. Yeah, and Janine, so pull that microphone forward so we can hear you. Thank you. It's not.
Okay. Janine,
Green and red, right? Come on, guys. We all know green and red.
I'm only seeing green, so
Okay.
no red.
All right, go ahead.
Janine Jones from Laramie, Wyoming. And I'm here to speak about the exemption process. I was asked by my ex-husband recently to help him with his exemption process. We hold the same faith, and he was applying for a religious exemption with General Electric Company. And so I wanted to share the difficulty of that process. It was about a 9-page application that we had to do, which took time away from both of our employment. It took me the better part of a day to help him because although we hold the same faith, it was clear that they wanted us to prove the statement of faith. And it did dive into what I feel was an invasion of privacy, asking specific questions on denominations, which organized religion, also prying into specific prescription and over-counter medicines that have been taken over the past years in reference to fetal cell. And that's basically all I have to say, is just my firsthand experience of how I felt like it was a very difficult process. It was very stressful for him trying to prove his position, knowing his job is on the line. He knows how he feels, but now diving into a doctrine that we both share and in a very short amount of time to prove his case for his decision. It just feels like a very wrong process. Additionally, I would like to also speak to natural immunity and urge you to consider that as an exemptive standard. And then I wanted to ask you if any of you are aware of where an employee can obtain the FDA-approved Comirnaty vaccine.
So-
Whoever wants to.
Yeah, well, we usually ask questions, so.
Well, I mean, if this is something that's
Yeah,
being
yeah.
considered, where do
Yeah.
we get the FDA
I'll
approved?
I'll let
vaccine?
Representative, we've got some amendments dealing with some of these issues. Go ahead, Representative Bear.
Just a little research, and to my knowledge, it's unavailable
Okay.
in this region.
Any other questions, committee? Okay, we appreciate it. I do have just a quick question. You say you had to put down all of your prior medications?
No, they list specific prescriptive and over-the-counter medications. And if you say that you have taken those as an adult, it's very clear in the form that it will go against you
Okay,
because of the fetal cell involvement.
okay, all right.
And
thank
you also have to state whether you plan to ever take that in the future. Such as, I think, even Prilosec. I mean, very common things were listed on there.
Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate
you.
it. I'm going to say this first name wrong, but is it Ania Somerville? If I butchered your name, please correct me.
You got it very close to Andy Somerville.
Okay, so, all right. I know some Somervilles up in Powell. They're from Worland originally. Any relation?
Mr. Chairman, I can't claim any relation. I married into the family from Western Nebraska.
Oh, okay, all right, all right. Please say your name, where you're from, and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Somerville, I am the Executive Director for the Wyoming Association of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Centers, and I appreciate being in front of this committee. It's not a committee I get to come in front of very often. Spend most of my time at the Labor Health Committee. I am here to just voice some general concerns that your community mental health centers have concerning House Bill 1. And just a little background very quickly, community mental health centers for this committee, there are about 12 of them in the state that serve all 23 counties. And our mission as community mental health centers is to provide mental health and or substance use disorder treatment to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. So most of our clients are at the lower socioeconomic status, and they also frequently have comorbid conditions that make them prone to health problems along with their mental health issues. So we are truly dealing with some of Wyoming's most vulnerable residents. I want to talk a little bit about the private business nature of the community mental health centers. So there is one that is run by a county agency. All other are private nonprofit businesses. For the past 18 months, I would describe what they have been doing to keep both their outpatient and residential services open as making battlefield decisions on a daily basis, especially when it comes to residential care. You're talking about congregate care with a lot of residents in one place and staff coming in and out. It has been very difficult to keep COVID-19 out of the facilities, especially prior to the vaccination releases. Now I want to shift just a little bit to the financial side of this. As community mental health centers, they all have contracts through the state of Wyoming that are funded in part by an HHS SAMHSA block grant. That is a significant amount of money for the state of Wyoming that passes through to these centers. In addition, most of them are federal contractors in one way or another. They hold Department of Justice contracts, U.S. probation and parole, a variety of substance use disorder contracts with a variety of federal agencies. What we know today from the vaccine mandate is a few of these centers will be caught up in it because they have more than 100 employees. We have 3 out of 12 that are at that level. What we are unsure of is what that looks like for the rest of the federal contracts, even for some of our tiniest centers. And I would describe one center that we have kind of in the northern central part of the state that has only 10 employees in it. They're providing rural and frontier mental health care to the community in the surrounding area. What we are concerned about is that we don't know what that guidance and those rules are going to be from the federal government because we haven't seen it yet. Our concern is that the legislation may be premature in the fact that we don't know what we're dealing with yet. And while we understand that the committee's desire and the legislature's desire to move forward, we do have those concerns and would urge some caution and some flexibility in the legislation where possible so that we can adjust accordingly. The community mental health centers fully support Governor Gordon's approach in moving forward through the judicial process, and we hope that that will be able to provide the protection we need to our employers as well as care for our clients. But we do understand that there's legislation on the table. So we would ask you to be considerate of what type of flexibilities we can allow in this legislation for employers that do have federal contracts. To be specific, the community mental health centers that I can account for today, since last week, have approximately $20 million in federal contracts outside of the SAMHSA contracts that come on the ground to provide mental health and substance use disorder treatment to a variety of citizens in the state of Wyoming. Losing those contracts because they're put in the position of either having to obey the state and lose the contracts and the money, or obey the feds, get the money, but be in trouble with various fines and penalty provisions, puts our centers in an untenable position and ultimately hurts the clients. So I would ask you to keep that in mind as we kind of wade through uncharted waters. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll keep the rest of my comments brief and stand for any questions.
Yep. Committee, any questions? Okay, thank you. We appreciate
Thank you,
your
Mr. Chairman.
comments. We got Keith Kennedy listed next.
I'll just go here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Get
and
red
I know
light,
you
green light,
expect
yeah.
Me to be professional.
Yeah.
Keith Kennedy on behalf of, first of all, on behalf of the Wyoming Wheat Growers Association, who would support any prohibition or restriction on imposing mandates. As you may be aware, many of the farmers that we represent actually serve on county committees and on state committees, and they've been informed that they will be required to be vaccinated to continue to serve on those committees. I also, my own business, we are a federal contractor and have already granted our religious exemptions that were requested. To change hats just a bit, my wife has been a RN for over 43 years and has worked in an ER for over 40 years. We have both contracted COVID in late September. I'm happy to be off quarantine, and I would strongly urge that you acknowledge natural immunity as equivalent to the vaccination. In point of fact, some of the most recent data from England would show that the unvaccinated are less likely now than the vaccinated on a per capita basis to contract COVID. And I think as time goes on, we will see what you heard earlier on the floor, that we have some leaky vaccines in this. This is a very changing situation, and I really believe that this should be a personal decision on people's behalf. And with that, I'd welcome your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Candy, any questions? Okay, thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Okay, so folks, that's the end of my list, but is there anyone else who wishes to testify? So this, let me see how many there are, because I know, okay, so we got 1, 2, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so yeah, we'll just start, let's start in the back with the white coats. All right, come on forward. And so it's about 6 people. Again, brief comments and be helpful for us. Thank you. Please sit down and introduce yourself.
All right, so I'm Andrew McAfee. I'm a physician anesthesiologist in Casper, Wyoming.
I'm Melissa Heave. I'm an OBGYN in Casper, Wyoming.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and offer a little bit of a different perspective about how this affects the workplace, and then as well as counter argument to why we should have vaccine mandates. So with that, good afternoon. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Dr. Andrew McAfee. I'm a physician anesthesiologist, and more importantly, a Catholic. It is through my faith that I have the courage to speak in front of you today. Also with me here are a group of outstanding healthcare professionals. We work tirelessly to provide medical care for those who come to us in need. Collectively, we are here to discuss vaccine mandates, a topic which has made waves nationwide. These policies are highly controversial and have become problematic across the United States. Those who disagree with mandates are being erroneously portrayed as anti-vaxxers. I would like to be clear that none of us here or our many supporters have ever considered ourselves to be anti-vaxxers. In fact, many have chosen to get the COVID-19 vaccine and some have not. Our decisions are personal and based on a risk-benefit analysis to decide what is the best course of action. That is how medicine works. As a physician, my job is to educate patients about the risks and the benefits of their options so that they can make educated medical decisions for themselves. Nowhere along the way in my training did I learn that medicine is a one-size-fits-all practice, nor did I learn that coercion is the appropriate indication to take medicines. Vaccine mandates disrespect the doctor-patient relationship and violate the patient's right to autonomy. Article 1, Section 38 of the Wyoming Constitution states that each competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own healthcare decisions. Additionally, these policies are divisive and have created tension everywhere they are implemented. Mandates are disruptive and toxic to the workplace. Individuals in the workforce who do not wish to be vaccinated are bullied, shamed, intimidated, and silenced until they either comply or face harsh consequences. Based on this information, it's clear that vaccines are not the issue. Instead, the real issue is bad policy, poor leadership, and extreme political exploitation of COVID-19 and the vaccines. The harmful consequences of vaccine mandates are truly disturbing. I'm concerned about the psychological and emotional distress they are causing people. I'm concerned about families losing an income they need to buy food and pay bills. I'm concerned about healthcare facilities and other businesses that may not be able to function to their full capacity due to fewer qualified individuals in the workforce. We must not let the solution to COVID be as detrimental as the virus itself. The optimist in me believes that we can find a better way forward. Many people like to argue they are following the science and that those who do not want to be vaccinated are uneducated. Let's consider the science of the vaccines. The available COVID vaccines provide imperfect protection through a novel mechanism. The vaccines introduce genetic material into the patient, mRNA in the case of Pfizer and Moderna, and DNA using an adenovirus vector in the case of Johnson & Johnson. The patient's own cellular machinery is used to convert the genetic material into the viral spike protein of the COVID-19 virus. The immune system recognizes the spike protein as foreign and mounts an immune response against it. Subsequent exposure to COVID is met with preformed immunity. Although infection still occurs, the symptoms are attenuated due to the preformed immune response. The misconception in all of this is that vaccines prevent infection and transmission of the virus, which is simply not true. Therefore, if an individual wants protection from COVID, they need to be vaccinated themselves. By forcing vaccination, we are only potentially helping those being forced, but we are also potentially harming them at the same time. I already mentioned the negative consequences of vaccine mandates, so let me discuss some of the potential side effects of the vaccine itself. According to the CDC Vaccine Adverse Events Report website, we have seen the following: deaths, hospitalizations, urgent care visits, doctor's office visits, anaphylaxis, Bell's palsy, miscarriages, heart attacks, myocarditis, pericarditis, permanent disability, thrombocytopenia, and various life-threatening reactions and severe allergic reactions, as well as reactivation of shingles. This amounts to a total of 818,042 reports of adverse events as of October 15th, 2021. Considering the negative consequences of mandates and the potential adverse effects of the vaccine, it's obvious that mandates and vaccines are not benign. Throw in the lack of long-term data and research, and I think it's safe to say that government entities and private employers have no business forcing people to be injected with a vaccine. Freedom of choice must be upheld. Several other notable issues include: we are ignoring the value of robust natural immunity in immunocompetent people. The vaccines are unapproved, inadequately tested, experimental, and dangerous biological agents that have the potential to cause substantial harm. Many people affected by mandates are young adults who are healthy and immunologically competent. They are at extraordinarily low risk for COVID-19 morbidity and mortality. Women are at a unique risk for adverse events following the administration of COVID vaccines. According to the CDC, all cases of life-threatening blood clots after receiving the J&J vaccine reported so far in the United States occurred in young women. The vast majority of cases of anaphylaxis have also occurred in women. In addition, women are reporting having irregular menstrual cycles after being vaccinated. 2,631 miscarriages have been reported to the VAERS system. I could keep going with the list surrounding vaccine mandates, but I won't, because we might be here all day. Instead, I'd like to leave you with the story of a young woman who I met just last night. A young mother. She makes $15 an hour and relies on that to support her and her child. Her religious exemption was denied. The thought that she may not be able to pay bills or put food on the table for her daughter is heartbreaking. There is no justification for harming the unvaccinated. The community stands with us on these issues. Today, we ask you to stand strong for freedom, for the Constitution, and for the people of our great state. The individuals being affected by vaccine mandates are not corporate big shots. They are the true heroes, the essential workers who face this pandemic head on. And sadly, now they are the second-class citizens who risk losing everything if they dare to have an opinion or make their own choice. Please help us put a stop to this attack on our freedom and let our strength and compassion for all people set an example for the United States.
Thank you. Doctor, did you have anything to add? Or?
I just wanted to say, keeping in mind what he's talked about, I went through the bill and just had some suggestions that number one, we could consider accepting all exemptions, not only religious ones being denied, but there are medical exemptions written by the person's healthcare provider that are being denied. Number two, I'd like you to consider reasonable accommodations, which based on the information given there and some information out there, testing, if vaccinated people carry the virus and can spread it and can catch it, then testing should be done for everybody or only those symptomatic. And I think we also need to consider the fact that a nasal swab also can decrease our own immune barriers. We are shoving it up in the nose, decreasing the ciliary action, decreasing the mucous membrane, which is part of the protection of killing off viruses and toxins and pathogens and allergens. So I'm not for testing frequently because I think that increases our susceptibility to other things. And if we're going to do it, we need to do it for all that could carry virus, which is vaccinated and unvaccinated. I also would like to make a point of we really should be accepting natural immunity. When people get chickenpox or hepatitis, we're not curing or treating them with a vaccine. And I suffered COVID in December, and I've been around it a lot and have not been reinfected. So I believe our natural immunity, our bodies are amazing when we keep them healthy, and we should consider that. I also feel like we need to think about the impact this has on Wyoming. Not only are we losing people to the workforce over this mandate, but we're also, losing the taxes they pay and the support systems that they pay into, and making more people in need of those things. And I've seen recently where they're proposing denying these to anyone that refused the vaccine. And I just think, these are the very people that are paying into the systems, and we need to consider that they've paid into it for years, and it's there for everybody. And then for them to not be allowed access to that just because of a mandate, we should consider that part in the bill as well. And just in conclusion, to keep in mind too, that when we're talking about the healthcare employer, we still are talking about those leading this action, the physician, the nurse practitioner, the PA, who has the training, licensing, and knowledge and skill to determine this. And that we need to keep them in mind versus the business or the company and the organization making these mandates.
Okay. Thank you, committee. Any questions? Yep, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, thank you very much for coming and testifying and being MDs. My wife is a physician, so I understand that really grueling process that you go through medical school, residency, et cetera. It's incredibly difficult. So I do appreciate you guys going through that process.
Thank you.
My question is, it's clear, obviously, that you can have the vaccine and still transmit the virus. How much less likely are you to transmit it than someone who is unvaccinated?
I saw recently a statistic that said that those people who had been vaccinated were 6 times less likely to test positive for COVID.
I also saw, the data is confusing, and you do have to search for things, and things are being censored. But I also saw that there may be increased viral load and decreased symptoms by those being vaccinated. And so, if you look at that, then perhaps there's a higher risk of danger to the workforce or who we're working for if we have someone with less symptoms yet still spreading virus.
Chairman, follow.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any information on someone, let's say, who was unvaccinated, but did come down and contract the virus? They made a full recovery. What's the ratio of their likelihood to spread the virus versus someone who was vaccinated? Is there any clarity on that?
So I'm not fully sure, but I did see a statistic that came from a study in Israel that showed that those who had previous infection were actually 13 times less likely to have a severe infection from COVID compared to those vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine.
Chairman, follow up.
Sure. Representative Western, if we are in the business of weighing the weight of different medical studies, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said you saw a stat that someone who was vaccinated is 6 times less likely to transmit.
To test positive.
Hold on. We're gonna, okay, go ahead.
They were 6 times less likely to test positive.
Mr. Chairman, so because you expressed concerns about, well, if we're going to test the unvaccinated, we need to test the vaccinated, pardon me. So assuming that status is accurate and it holds weight, we'll just, for the purpose of this discussion, we'll assume that's true. Does that mean that we should test unvaccinated people 6 times more often than those who are vaccinated? So let's say vaccinated people are still getting tested, but they should be tested at a frequency 6 times less than those who are unvaccinated are still employed. Is that a reasonable metric?
Go ahead.
I think that what we should consider is what we've been doing for a year and a half. If you're symptomatic, you get tested. If you're not symptomatic, whether you're vaccinated or not, you potentially could be spreading virus.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, follow up.
You bet, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What about for areas of the hospital? I understand certain areas deal with patients who are, less have to have immunocompromised patients. But what about those areas of the hospital where they have a serious immunodeficiency illness, where they are extremely likely not only to contract it, but to have really serious, perhaps even fatal response to the virus? Same kind of policy there with unvaccinated versus vaccinated employees?
Well, I think if they're that fatal and serious and vaccinated can carry the virus and spread it, then yeah, everybody should be tested. That's working there. If we're also saying that the test is that accurate and reliable, I guess.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I mean, in that sort of a scenario, we would have to be concerned about both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated individuals. That's what makes sense.
And I think what we're forgetting altogether is, potentials of treating this in other ways that, there are people out there that believe there are other ways of treating this, that it does not have to come down to vaccine or the horrors of COVID.
You good? Okay, all right, thank you. So members of the public, I did get an updated list, so I'll follow through that updated list. So next I have David Wagner. So kind of in the order I was going to go anyway. I just randomly got the right list. Green light, introduce yourself.
Hi. Sorry. My name's David Wagner. I'm a paramedic at Wyoming Medical Center, and in less than a week, I will be walked out the door. I am not vaccinated. I have not put in an exemption. So I will begin the process of being separated from Wyoming Medical Center. My wife was a nurse at Wyoming Medical Center. She's since left since the mandate hit. We also have a friend who was a nurse at Wyoming Medical Center. She's turned in her notice. She's leaving over the mandate. There are just a few of the people who have left over these mandates. They say, there's this many who've been vaccinated, this many turned in exemptions, this many unvaccinated. They're not counting the number who's left already, which puts a great strain on the system. So I didn't turn in exemption because I just feel that the things that Banner will make you do, the twice a week testing, just don't make any sense. As it's been stated here, the vaccinated and unvaccinated can both catch COVID and they can both spread COVID. If you want a specific study, I would recommend you go to the cdc.gov, look up MMWR, volume 70, number 31. This was a study of large gatherings in Massachusetts, and they found that 74% of those who caught COVID from the gatherings were fully vaccinated, 80% of those hospitalized, fully vaccinated. They also tested the viral load and found that the number or the amount of virus between the vaccinated and unvaccinated was equal. So if you wanted a specific study, I recommend you go to that one. So, so I also want to talk about if you put in a mandate here, it could help businesses because there are many people leaving in other states over mandates. They've quit their positions. They're looking for somewhere to go. It's a good way to attract qualified and skilled people to the state of Wyoming. We currently have staffing shortages all over. Those are going to get worse with these mandates. For instance, currently Banner Health reviewed how many ambulances we have on, and they've stated we have enough work that we can put a fourth ambulance into service. We can't put one in. We don't have the staffing. Talked to my manager. He said we have 0 applicants. So I can't say why they're not coming, but I know other areas are hiring, and those are areas that do not have mandates right now. I'm one of the applicants to some of those areas. So since I will be out of a job in just over a month. So I just think a mandate will help Wyoming just
get good, skilled, qualified people here. Or correction, bill against
We-
mandates.
We understand what you, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions, committee? Okay, Mr. Wagner, thank you. And thank you for being an AMT. Very important job. Understand, appreciate that much. I got Sienna Shelby. This is next. Okay. Okay, the committee appreciates that. Brian Miller and Roger Miller, we come together or just, okay?
Got the green one, sir.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Brian Miller, 49-year resident in the state of Wyoming, and retired Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force and chairman of the Sheridan County Republican Party. The tyranny of this administration has replaced freedom and liberty through mandate after mandate. Mandatory masking, mandatory vaccines, mandating that businesses enforce vaccine mandates that require employees to choose between a job and a jab. Our governor has chosen not to address this tyranny by failing to immediately take executive action to maintain our freedom and liberty by countering these mandates. Thus is it up to you, our Wyoming legislature, to ensure our constitutional rights as citizens of our state and this once great nation to be free of oppression, public disclosure of our private medical information, and be secure in our persons, houses, papers, and effects. Failure of our legislature to protect Wyoming citizens' rights seems unfathomable. However, as I witnessed earlier today, this may just be the case. In the Senate this morning, one senior member stated that we must not change rules to do our job, and claiming that a duly called special session to address these egregious violations was a willy-nilly decision made by a majority of the 90 members of our legislature. In a separate argument in this morning's session, legislators in both houses stated that the cost is too high to be convening a special session and too short to do it perfectly. Really? Too high to protect our liberty and freedom? Too high to put in place laws that can keep thousands of our fellow Wyomingites across the state from losing their job, losing their livelihood that allows them to house and feed their families, care for aging parents, or even donate to their favorite legislator? We also heard this morning that key elements of this legislation have been discussed in the interim for months on end. I ask, how much time is needed to protect Wyoming citizens from tyrannical acts of the federal government? A government seemingly bent on enslaving a new generation to those in power in Washington, D.C. Citizens who have become trapped in the flypaper maze of government assistance and social programs that are driving so many to become part of a permanent lower class. Friends, neighbors, and legislators, it's time to put the U.S. Constitution and individual rights at the forefront. I urge each of you to stay the coming storm that inevitably will paralyze our state and our nation. Draw the line here in Cheyenne during this session and begin the push to restrain the federal government's growing acts of overreach. Protect our freedom, protect our liberty, and we will be able to take care of our own families without government handouts. Don't let your neighbor become a political pawn, not even for a moment. Don't allow people to be fired simply because they won't allow the government to stick a needle in their arm against their will. Life is not risk-free, but we get to decide what risk we will take with vaccines and medications. It's not up to President Biden, Dr. Fauci, or Ms. Harris. And only you stand between their political agenda and we, the people who elected you to office. God bless Wyoming and God bless our nation. And thank you for letting me speak.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any questions, committee? Okay, thank you. We have Dr. Hawthorne. So it's a Joe Hawthorne. That's here. Okay, I'll move on. Okay. Yeah, so I've got one person online. Why don't we go? I got Frank Ethorn listed next. So I'll finish out my list here and then we'll bring in the gentleman online. There's just the one? Okay, all right. So Mr. Eathorn here? Okay.
Hello, my name is Frank Thorne. I'm a rancher in Converse County. I personally contracted COVID just about a year ago. I didn't have a real severe case. I didn't go to the doctor, didn't go to the hospital. I just stayed at home and recovered. It took me about 10 days. But at any rate, then I felt I had a natural immunity. I went to and I did have a positive test too, by the way. My wife's in a nursing home, and so in order to visit her, I had to have a test. So I did that. And I was curious about my natural immunity. So I asked my doctor to give me an order to get a blood draw and have that tested. And I did, and it came back a number in the area of 200. And I asked, what does that mean? She said, we don't know. The data's not out there. That was 7 or 8 months ago, and I still don't know. I'd like to think, I said, I'd like to know if my natural immunity is more than the number I would have gotten had I had the vaccination. And I was told that data is not out there either. So, you know, I'm a little concerned. I like to travel to see my daughter in Florida and other people. And I'm concerned that soon we won't be able to get on an airplane without a vaccine passport. So I'm hoping that you can take some action here that will head that off, and we will be allowed to proceed normally with our lives, I guess is what I'd say. So I'm 81 years old, you know, and so I don't intend to be vaccinated. I think my natural immunity should be sufficient, but I don't think that's going to get me on an airplane. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. Any questions for Thorne? All right. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I got Monica Henry next, and then why don't we get the person that's online? They're just killing me with these names, but we'll get him online and then we'll get him in. So, okay. So Monica Henry, am I saying that right? Henry? Okay. I have Sally next. So why does Sally come forward? Okay.
Sally Oban, I'm from Douglas. I am not in the medical profession, and I didn't know that I was signing up to speak, but I got something to say, so I'll say it. My daughter is in the medical field, and she is the last in her clinic to not get the vaccine. She's kind of hoping to skate through because she has 3 brain tumors, and she has epilepsy, and she has an eating disorder that has shrunk her brain and her heart. So on top of her already compromised health, if she's forced to get this vaccine, she's in huge trouble. She's already called and said, will you please pay my rent if I have to get this vaccine? You know, I have a friend who works for Union Pacific Railroad. He's less than 2 years from retirement. He has heart issues. He's had a heart ablation. He has diabetes. He's a healthy guy. I mean, you would never know there's anything wrong with him, but UP is not taking exemptions of any kind. He cannot get a medical exemption and have it accepted. He's already been told that. He has till November 8th to get the vaccine. And I'm sure you guys have seen the data on enlarged hearts that's coming from the vaccine. I think from all the vaccines. from what I'm aware, from what I've read. So, I mean, it's a scary thing out there where you have to decide between your life and your livelihood. My daughter's 23 years old, and with an already compromised system, what's that going to do to her? So that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate it. Any questions, committee? Thank you for coming forward and sharing. We appreciate that. Okay, so so Tony with NFIB is online. Can we unmute, sir? And I'm not going to attempt your name. I apologize. Just make sure we can hear you. So introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tony Gagliardi, and I am the Wyoming State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business, representing approximately 2,700 small businesses in Wyoming. Our concern really is contained in a very small part of the bill. Under Section 3, presumptive language has been added in there that should a worker contract the virus, the disease, it would be presumed they contracted it in the workplace. To NFIB, this has been a sticking point for us for a lot of years and in a lot of pieces of legislation. We look at it as the camel's nose under the tent. What it does is it lays out a standard that could be used in other types of COVID liability litigation. We have always spoke out against any type of presumptive language, even for workers' compensation cases, specifically dealing with COVID. And so we ask that language at least be, we cannot support the bill just because of the topic, but we ask that it be at least removed from the bill.
Okay, Mr. Gagliardi, did I get that?
Gagliardi, yes, sir.
And I apologize. I'm terrible.
That's all right.
Yeah, like Smith Jones, Greer with an extra vowel. Like
okay. Just call me Tony. It's easier.
Okay. I do have a question. So with respect to House Bill 1001, and again, this bill was designed to bring together a lot of concepts to have a good open debate. So I did want to make that clear. With respect to the workers' comp coverage within this bill, it is for those employers that issue a mandate and an illness occurs as a result of the vaccination. Were you aware of how that read?
I am. I am, but it's you're reaching with this language. What you are in essence saying is if there is a mandate, then anybody who turns up positive is going to be, it's going to be presumed it was because of the workplace. And that's, there's no way an employer has any certainty of where it was contracted at, well, nor does the employee. So that's their reason for asking for the removal of that particular language.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we all understand that particular issue. Okay, committee, any further questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your concerns. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. So I've got one last name left to testify. And of course, it's a last name, but so Courtney, I'm not going to try the last name. Yeah, my skill set's limited, and I'm tell you, pronouncing last names is way down on that too. So. Green light.
Perfect. So I'm Courtney Bizot.
Bizot. Okay, thank you.
I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for the last 10 years. I've worked at CRMC and I currently work at the Cheyenne VA Medical Center, working with our great Wyoming veterans. I've been on the front lines since the beginning of all of this. And I can tell you that, yes, it is very awful to watch. I've been in the ICU taking care of all of our veterans that are vented, not vented, vaccinated, not vaccinated. A vaccine doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is taking care of my veterans and taking care of any other patients I have. This mandate is doing more harm than good. Currently, as a federal employee, I am federally mandated. I can tell you that nurses are walking out at an alarming rate. The short staffing we're seeing is based on nurses who they don't want to work anymore because of all this mandate. We shouldn't be forced to do something that we don't feel we need to have done just to take care of patients. There's processes in place, there's PPE, there's everything that we've done up until this point. And I just hope that all of you listen and understand that you're doing more harm than good if the mandate stays in place. Nurses will walk. 9 nurses in the ER at CRMC walked out. 9, that's huge. And what did they replace them with? Nothing.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you. So that was the end of the list that I had. I noticed a couple of legislators that came in. Do we have more? How many more want to testify? And so, okay, do any of the legislators that come in want to testify? So Representative Clausen. Okay, so sir, you'll be our last public testimony, and I've got everybody covered pretty much. So please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Green, not red. My name is Jeff Story. I'm the Assistant CMO of CRMC here in Cheyenne. I'm a veteran, retired colonel in the military, private citizen, an OBGYN who's practiced in town for 25 years, fellow in the American Congress of OBGYN. A couple of points. I wasn't originally planning on testifying, but felt important to do so. At CRMC, we've taken a slightly different point of view. We've resisted a mandate to this point and really undertaken an education campaign in order to discuss with our employees the benefits of vaccination versus not vaccinating. To this point, we have approximately 80% of our employees vaccinated within the hospital. This morning, I visited 3 floors of COVID patients. We have 1 to 2 beds a day available because of COVID taking the hospital over. We have 34 patients with COVID in the hospital at the moment. If you end up ventilated with COVID, you have a greater than 50% chance of never coming off that ventilator. And how we gain beds in the hospital and see our numbers decline, unfortunately, is most often not through making someone better and allowing them to leave. Vaccines are not perfect. The science is not perfect. And we absolutely agree that a mandate dictating that everyone has to do something is not the appropriate way to go. However, as a healthcare organization in this state, it makes it very hard if it also is mandated in the opposite direction of saying we can't use those tools that we have available to ensure that our patients are safe, our employees are safe, and we mitigate this pandemic as quickly as possible to achieve that normalcy that we all craved from 2 years ago. The vaccines have been around for a number of years. These vaccines, VAERS that the good doctor spoke about earlier, did show up with 800,000 side effects. Those are self-reported side effects from severe to minimal. There have been over 414 million doses of vaccine, indicating a well less than 1% side effect rate to the vaccinations. Vaccines do provide antibodies, and we can go into how they provide them if you are so inclined. But what we have found with natural immunity is it's very effective initially and very effective for the surge and the variant type of that surge. That immunity flags if you go to a region that has had a different variant of COVID and over time. And we're seeing people reinfected after approximately 6 months of natural immunity. And so natural immunity, absolutely agreed, provides very good protection in the initial stages after COVID infection. But as you move further away, that immunity flags. Vaccines, and the reason that the vaccine has 2 dosing is you boost that immunity to a level that provides a better level of overall immunity. The vaccine as well attacks more than 5 different points on the virus versus natural immunity using 1 single point on that virus, creating a much broader immune spectrum against having the vaccine. As part of CRMC's executive core, a member of Wyoming Medical Society and Wyoming Hospital Association, we would implore the committee to reconsider mandating against a mandate, in turn allowing those individual businesses to proceed with what works best for their situation moving forward. And in our case, using the science that's available at the time and adjusting and being agile to adjust those situations as we move forward. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, committee? I'm gonna go Representative Duncan, then Heiner. She was quicker on the draw, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you by chance read the current bill, House Bill 1001?
I did. I have it here. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, follow up. What do you feel about that? Does that inhibit your to be able to do what you want to do versus for the individual businesses to be able to make those decisions best for their employees? Or does it prevent you from being able to do that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Very good question. The parts of the bill that concern us are the penalties that we are put under in the fight against the federal mandate of a vaccine. And while we do not support an overarching mandate to be liable should we decide that we need to mandate for our employees either testing, protection, those sorts of things, it puts us, just as the Federation of Gagliardi said, it's the liability you place on those individual businesses that puts the onus on us should we get and continue to vet the information coming in and decide that, you know, in our best interest, a mandate is for the protection of both our patients and our employees.
Okay, thank you. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here and deciding to testify. We've heard a number of testimonies today about people that are being forced to leave their employment or voluntarily leaving employment. And we know that our healthcare facilities are under stress right now. So this puts an added stress on your organization if someone decides to leave or is forced to leave. And speaking with some of the administrators in my local hospital, I've seen some of the costs for an employed nurse versus the cost for a traveling nurse. And it's astronomical what you have to pay for a traveling nurse to fill those gaps when some of the nurses decide to walk out or are let go. So turning the page here a little bit, some of these facilities are nonprofit, but they still have to turn a profit or be in the black. When you get into a situation where you have a number of personnel leaving or being forced out, and you have to bring in traveling people to, nurses or whatever that profession may be, who makes up that difference? Because sometimes this is 5 times the cost of what a normal person makes that is a full-time employee. So does that hit your bottom line, or are there federal dollars or grants to make up that difference to cover the additional cost of traveling nurses?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent question. And you are absolutely spot on. Cost of a traveling nurse today, and that's only if you can actually find them to come in, run 4 to 6 times the cost of a normal nurse. In addition, I am responsible for quality in our institution. And having a traveling nurse come to your institution who is not familiar with your medical system, how to deliver meds within your system, how to document what is done in the system, it puts a risk to that system as well. The overall cost for nurses is astronomical when you have to replace them with traveling nurses. That is borne out by the bottom line of the hospital. And with that, we have some federal dollars to offset it, though at this point, a number of those federal dollars have not been realized. And our bottom line shrinks closer and closer to not actually being in the black, but being in the red. In addition, COVID taking over the hospital has precluded us from being able to assist those typical patients with ongoing problems. And unfortunately, heart attacks still occur. People still break their hips. They still, have problems that need to be addressed. And when we have nowhere to put them, it makes it very, very difficult to treat those ongoing problems when the hospital is entirely full of COVID patients. And so our bottom line gets narrower and narrower as this occurs, and nothing that would make any of us happier than to see it go away. And a year ago, I would have told you there's no way we're going to be sitting here talking about COVID at this point, but here we are, unfortunately, and it's, I think, a reality for some time to come. So it's getting closer and closer. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So could it be said then that you are really, as an organization, you don't want to lose your employees that you have right now, and reasonable accommodations would help you to be able to better serve the community as well as to keep your organization in the black? And so what we do here to keep people employed could actually benefit your organization.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That's exactly correct. A stable current employee beats a traveling employee 3 ways to Monday. And we would and have worked with our employees, both encouraged the vaccine, but not mandated, and addressed those who are reluctant to receive the vaccine, most often based on misinformation about the vaccine and what it entails, how it works, and through ongoing education as we learn it, and it's ongoing within the medical field as we learn more and more. Encouraged vaccines, but do not mandate them. And we've been reluctant to head in that direction because we value our employees and would rather work with those accommodations, including masks and personal protective equipment for those who have chosen not to be mandated. And to this point, we've done very well with very minimal transmission within our facilities.
All right. Well, thank you. We appreciate your testimony. So with that, I'm going to close public testimony, but leave it open for the legislators. And so I heard Representative Clausen has hand up, but my co-chair of Senate Minerals, Chairman, always has a seat at the table here. We haven't had anybody colorblind, which is a complicated thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Jim Anderson. I just had one comment. The question was asked earlier, why can't the providers that were providing in July of last year continue to provide as they were then? It struck me that we are now dealing with the variant, the Delta variant, that is more transmittable and more deadly. The COVID-19 last year was deadly for my age group, and quite a few of us made it through. The variant now is down to 12 to 18 years old. Now we're killing the whole range of population, and it is more transmittable. And that's why the difference in the approach. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Chairman Anderson? Okay, hopefully we see you in Rock Springs in a week. Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frank Whitflyer at the Minerals Committee. But as you're aware, my district has a lot of heavy industry, and I assumed it would come up in testimony, but it hasn't. So there's at very least a perception that going along with that heavy industry, there's some heavy pensions, and there's at least some perception in my area that maybe those pensions might need to be protected with some legislation. And I was just going to ask if you would consider that as an amendment and or at least throw it out there for discussion.
So Representative Clausen, I think, so what we're going to try to do, this committee, is work this with some amendments that we have in front of us. There'll be opportunities on the floor and an opportunity maybe to work on refining some language. We may not get it perfect here today, which is why we go through 3 more readings. And so understand exactly what you're saying and appreciate it. Any questions for Representative Clausen? Okay, thank you. Okay, what we're going to do is this take a break till I've got 4:18. Let's try to get started again at 4:30, 4:35. At that point in time, I'll go ahead and present House Bill 1001, and then we'll see if the committee wants to work it, and we'll go down the path of for those folks that are unfamiliar with this process. The term making sausage, you'll get to see the very beginning portion of that. So let's go ahead and recess, take a break, bio break, stretch your legs, try to get started again right after 4:30. Oh, which amendment's this?
Mine. Yours is over there. We can't share those.
Whose amendment is this? Gray, oh, it's Chuck Gray's. Yeah, I got all these up here.
Oh, it's updated.
Okay, let me take that and get rid of this one. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead, committee. We'll call the meeting back to order. Okay, so we've got everybody, right? Okay, committee, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through House Bill 1001. I'm going to assume that the committee has read this bill closely. I know several members have discussed it at length with me. So I'll go pretty quick with it. And then we'll decide if we want to move the bill and work it. And I've shared this with the committee, I've shared this with leadership. Really out of this, I'd like to see us bring one bill up to the floor for consideration. And I have talked with Representative Hallinan and with Speaker Barlow with the concept if we can get 101 worked out of this committee. And again, I trust everybody on this committee to do a good job. Then we'll just table the other two. Again, we're only going to have so much time to debate these issues. We don't need to have competing bills that can create bad policy. So that's my goal. As the committee knows, I'm usually very upfront about those goals. So House Bill 1001, it has my name on it. Let me just tell you that as we were preparing for the special session, House and Senate Republican leadership had asked LSO to put together a bill that put together as many concepts that was out there concerning private employer mandates. There were two other bills drafted that are in other committees. I think one's in the Senate, maybe both the other two are in the Senate. The bill was designed to be amendable, which is what we're going to work on doing right now. One of the basic concepts of this bill is that it does allow an employer to issue a mandate, but they have to find a good reason for it, and they have to do that in writing and file it with the Department of Workforce Services. And then if they do so, they have to provide exemptions down through that, and then reasonable accommodations associated with it. In Section 7 is what I'm going to call is that savings clause, which provides that if we have a federal law that comes in that preempts, and federal law preempts state law, right now the way it reads is that Section 2 would go away. I think we could amend that to say to the extent federal law preempts it. Now, I'm sorry, I'm taking a little liberty as a chairman, but I have 150 plus employees. I don't want to be put in a position, as many of the other employers around the state, having to choose which law to violate and which business risk I need to take. So with that, let me go through it, and then we'll work through. I know Representative Gray and Representative Bear have some amendments for us that we all have. I've looked at them. There's kind of some overlap on more than half of them. So we'll work the bill section by section, try to work those in. A couple other ideas I know that are out there. I'm not going to go through the findings. I've never been a big fan of legislative findings, but as we put this together, we felt we put them in there. Quite frankly, if they come out, it doesn't bother me at all. Let me go in then. Section 2 is really the meat of the bill. And just to the extent that we're clear on this. So notwithstanding any other Wyoming law to the contrary, okay, no employer in the state of Wyoming shall require or mandate an employee to receive a COVID-19 vaccine as a condition of employment unless the following requirements are met. So the first one is an employer determines that it is necessary to provide for the safety and welfare of the workplace. Okay, that is articulated in writing and provided to the Department of Workforce Services. So it's in a central location that's done. 2, and I think this paragraph needs a little bit of work and we've got some amendments with it, but the employer provides and accepts exemptions, and those exemptions should be for religious grounds, medical, or what would be the immunity. Now, we heard some testimony that maybe our language here isn't the best. I would say we don't have to have perfect language today, but we should have perfect language before the bill is passed. And I'm not going to profess to know anything about the medical world. Okay. The employer, and this is, provides reasonable alternative measures to the employees who have not received the vaccine or who will not disclose their vaccine status. Reasonable alternatives are defined in here, and there's again some amendments to this, but reassignment of work duties, and then interval testing, as I'll just use that term, interval testing. Okay, the one thing I think is significant is that any mandate that an employer did and meets those requirements cannot take effect from 60 days from this act. So we've heard a lot of comments or testimony about, well, we don't know what the federal rules or anything are. Just hit the pause button here. Okay. Keeping in mind, we'll be back in a budget session to deal with things in February. Okay. An employer who first requires or mandates employees, so section B on page 7 then goes into the penalty phase. If you have a mandate and you do not meet those requirements, back in section A, there's a civil penalty. It's a placeholder at $100. I'll just tell you, as we put this bill together, that number varied from $100 to $5,000. I don't care. It's a placeholder. It's a debatable item. Okay. Also, except as provided in subsection E, and I'll jump, which is that this section, employer shall provide severance pay to any person entitled to severance pay as specified to subsection D if the person is unemployed because they voluntarily terminated because employer has imposed a requirement and that does not, has imposed a mandate that does not conform subsection A, or the person is terminated. Okay, for a vaccination requirement that does not conform to requirements of subsection A. What subsection D provides is just what that severance pay would be, and it's 50% of 13 weeks of salary. No employer shall be required to provide severance pay if the employer has established a vaccination requirement or mandate that took effect before October 31. The vaccination requirement or mandate related to the person's unemployment was established in accordance with subsection A. So what we're saying is a legal mandate, or the person began employment and was subject to it previously. So this is, you took the employment knowing that you needed to be vaccinated, which is significantly different in my mind. Okay. Department of Workforce Services shall enforce these provisions just like they do whenever I get a wage labor claim or discrimination claim. Nothing in this section shall be construed to limit or preclude an employee who's unemployed under one of the circumstances in C of the section from receiving any other benefits. So that means if you're getting unemployment benefits, you still can get the severance pay. Definitions are in here. I think And I think Representative Gray actually has an amendment to, oh, no, never mind. I'm sorry. This definition deals with workers' compensation. Okay. So this is talking about workers' compensation injury, and the same for the period beginning October 31, 2021, which we would assume be the effective date of this act, through March 31, 2022, which would be the end of our budget session cycle. If an employee suffers an injury caused by a COVID vaccination that the employer mandated on or after October 31, as a condition of employment, shall be presumed that the injury arises out of and in the course of employment. So we heard some testimony about concerns on presumptions there. But that was, now keep in mind, an employer has a legal mandate in place. Employee gets vaccinated, they get sick from the vaccination, they're covered under that employer's work comp. That's what that says. Okay, section 4, again, take this for what it is. Because I understand that there is a pot of 23 million of ARPA funds, stipends for hospitals that Representative Larson was telling me about coming out of appropriations. But this sets up a healthcare shortage relief and worker incentive program. This is designed and it'll be awarded through the governor's office. And what's he got in it here? $20 million. The idea is to help hospitals, our healthcare facilities deal with critical care issues or worker shortages. Okay. Moving on to section 5, there's appropriated another $10 million to the Department of Workforce Services. This is for all businesses, and this is to deal with testing. Representative Larson told me that, and I don't know, again, he said 2020 year to date, the spend on testing has been $100 million. Huh? So that's what state of Wyoming. Well, you'll have to talk to him more directly because I had a lot on my plate and I haven't been able to digest all the information. But the concept of this is that, and let me just point out, because I do have an amendment here on page 14, line 9, that the program created under that we go through March 31, 2022. Well, actually, ARPA funds will be in place, I think, till like December 2024. My feeling is that if we've got if there's an OSHA mandate that comes down and regular testing for employees that don't want to be tested, at at $100 a test, 150 employees, that adds up for an employer that doesn't want to issue a mandate like me. So this isn't about me, it's about everybody else, but I can relate my personal experiences dealing with this stuff. Yeah, we do have an amendment for that. Section 6. Okay. Section 6 is important, and I'm open to some subtle changes to it, but this really is the issue of preemption. If federal law comes in and preempts this, Section 2 goes away. We could consider a preemption that, to the extent that federal law would preempt it, that only that portion that's preempted goes away. If we have a legal mandate in place and it's defined, a state mandate that's in place, that is a mandate. But we make sure our exemptions are followed. So just something to consider. There's probably more to be sorted out in the court with this than we ever have dreamt. The provisions of this act relating, so section 7, and this is the timing requirement. This is for mandates that or employees that are affected by a mandate that goes into effect after October 31. Think again, Representative Gray, this is what I was going to say. He has an amendment, I think, makes this clearer. And so we'll look at that as well. Section 8 is that this act will go into effect immediately on completion of all acts necessary. That basically is signature or passage of both houses and signature of the governor. So with that, committee, sorry, I'm kind of truncating this, so we're not here all night. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, or we can dive in and work the bill. Are there any general questions? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you get any input from the Department of Workforce Services?
Representative Bear, I did not. I thought they might be here.
I would like to hear some input from them, probably, if we could.
You know, we are the legislature and they
Well, I
do
know.
what we tell them.
Yeah.
I have not. Yeah. Okay, what's the committee's pleasure? Moved by Duncan, seconded by Gray. Okay. Why don't we do this? Okay, so this take stock of the amendments that we have in front of us. What I have is a 2-page amendment by Representative Gray that's identified as proposed amendment. I'm looking at the last four, is 5702. That can't be right because Representative Bears is got the same number on it. Is that right? Okay, never mind. I've got 2 copies. All right, so we got a 2-page amendment from Representative Gray. Last four is 5702. We've got a 1-page on 2 sides from Representative Bear, which is 3101. We have an amendment from me regarding that date I referenced, which is House Bill 2701. We have another amendment from me, which is a technical correction provided to me by LSO, which may or may not be needed, which is 2702. Does everybody have those in hand? Do you have them all, Representative Sherwood? Okay. What? Are you sure that's all you got? Okay, 5701 will not be utilized. My understanding is Representative Gray did a correction on that, so 5701 can go off to the side. So I think, so as we go through the bill, we do have one of the amendments is to strike all of the findings. Representative Gray, was that one of your amendments?
Yeah.
Would you like to move that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move, this amendment is divisible, so I'm going to move amendment
This,
lines 1 through, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, Representative Gray, to interrupt you. Why don't we'll work the bill section by section, and then we'll just pull out your amendments, because what we'll end up having, remember, is one standing committee amendment that has all of our collective amendments in it. Yeah, so I'm trying to keep my mind clear here.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm missing something in your amendments, pipe up. But so while we're on page, while we're on section 1, okay, so that would be the first one.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So I move lines 1 through 10 of Amendment 5702. That those strike the legislative findings. I think on this bill, it's better we don't have legislative findings for a variety of reasons. I've had findings in my bill. Bills in the past. I just think on this one, we should not for a variety of reasons. And
Let's get a second. Did we get a second? Okay, keep going. Sorry.
yeah, thank you. So yeah, that's the amendment.
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, committee, all in favor of striking the findings, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Findings are struck. Okay, we'll also have to, Cindy, renumber as necessary. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna put these down here and then just put a pass on that. Okay, so that then takes us over to okay, so we're now on page 5. Is that correct? We're on page 4. Let me make sure I've got this right. Lines through 20. Okay, so B is as used in, so this non-codified section of this act. So you want the definitions to stay in?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. So Representative Bear, you had, I recall, a proposed amendment on page 4, line 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm going to strike that from my amendment. We had a discussion about this earlier. The intent of that line was simply to better define what this is that's being mandated. And the second definition on that line was not, in my opinion, a vaccine, but by changing it to the word drug, it makes it far too broad. So I'm going to strike that line
Okay.
4 from my amendment.
All right. So I'm looking at your amendment. So we're not going to move that. That'll be fine as is. Page 1. Okay. And so you had the page 1, line 2, Representative Bear.
Yeah, that's at the very beginning. It's just because I am adding a exemption in particular for emergency use authorization vaccines. And so that has to be part of.
So it'll be tied with another component. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. You guys got to help me keep these straight. Okay. All right. We're good? Everybody? Okay. All right. So going through the definitions and we get to page 5, section 2. And then page 5, lines 19 through 13 is Representative Bear is laying those out. No, yeah, he's not gonna, he withdrew that. Yeah. Yep.
Line 4, I withdrew line 4.
Okay, so we're on section 2 right now, right? Okay, so then this is where, so Representative Bear, and this is where this gets a little bit.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I actually, that emergency use authorization actually starts on page 4.
Right.
The only thing I'm striking was line 4 of my amendment. So I'd like to move the amendment and strike line 4 from the amendment.
Okay.
So
And
lines 1 through 18, I'd like to move that as a divisible amendment.
okay, through, I got it. Okay, so what your amendment would be is, and I'm looking at 3101, okay? I'm just gonna restate this for everybody. Line 1 is in the long title, needs to have an addition, okay? And then what you're looking at is line 6 through 18 as an amendment regarding emergency authorization. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and make that motion.
I'm going to change that from line 18 down to line 25.
Okay, yeah,
So-
I agree with that. Yeah.
So I move amendment 3101 to House Bill HB 1001, lines 1 through 25, minus line 4.
Okay. Committee tracking with him? Okay, is there a second? Yep, second. Okay, go ahead, Representative.
So this is adding to the other exemptions, which are medical and religious. We're also adding now emergency use authorization. We had some testimony about that today. The current vaccines are all under emergency use authorization. The particular language that's used here is also used in the vaccination requirements within our system of education. We do not require emergency use authorization vaccines in that area. And so I'm proposing that we add that to this bill.
Okay, so any discussion, committee, any questions on that? I'll keep asking questions, just to make sure we stay clear with that. So on page 4, line 13, you are inserting this in the definition section, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's an added definition. Does everybody understand that? We'll go slow. Make sure we do. Representative Bear? Okay, all right. Sensing, ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries enthusiastically. Okay,
Chairman Greer,
yes.
there was something that he deleted or was not going to include. Where is that? I'm
Okay,
sorry, I did
so
not
on-
have that.
So on the amendment, Cindy, 3101, line 4 is basically stricken from that. Then the rest of that is good to go.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Down to line 25. Thank you, Committee. Okay, to page 5. So this is where I'm trying to reconcile Representative Bear and Gray's amendment. And so why don't we go with Representative Gray's amendment, which does a better structure? And then Representative Bear, if you need to amend that amended language, if it passes, we'll do it that way. Does that work? Okay, so Representative Gray, you've got,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, go ahead.
I move lines 12 through 35 of Amendment 5702 and ask for a second so I can explain it.
Second, okay, Bear, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think this amendment, and Representative Bear can correct me if I'm wrong, it does what he wants to do plus some other things. And part of what I was trying to do overall with Amendment 5702 is provide clarity and also strengthen the bill. And I think the exemption portion of the bill is an extremely important portion of the bill. So what this does is it deletes the current language and it reinserts new language. That's lines 14 to 35. That's the amendment after lines 12 to 13, which just deletes what's currently there. And so what I'm trying to do here is the employer provides and accepts exemptions to the requirement or mandate upon submission of written evidence of an objection on medical or religious grounds in accordance with the following. A, an employer shall grant an exemption for religious grounds upon submission of an exemption. This gets to the issue we discussed earlier. To me, a religious exemption is between an individual and God. I don't understand how a third party can determine based on a sentence or two, and some were granted, some weren't, and that was confirmed in the testimony. So it will be a shall for the religious exemption. Part B is on the medical exemption. An employer shall grant an exemption for medical grounds upon submission of an exemption that is completed or signed by a licensed physician. I was out of the room presenting a bill on this. I hope they covered it. There have been some medical exemptions signed by physicians that have not been granted. To me, that should be a catch-all. And then it says for exemptions for medical grounds that are not signed or completed by a licensed physician, an employer may grant the exemption. So there they do get some authority to determine whether it's legitimate or not. And I think that is legitimate. Then C, this is actually, I think, an extremely important portion of the bill, specifically in the Banner situation, which they had an exemption that ended on October 1. And so there were some people that didn't submit exemptions thinking that the legislature was going to ban mandates entirely. I want to reopen that process for them and for those that have not yet gone into effect by October 31, which is the sort of the gradation point in the bill. So we use this language. An employer who has enacted a COVID-19 vaccine requirement before the effective date of this section and ceased to accept or solicit exemptions or did not accept or solicit exemptions before the effective date of this section shall accept and grant exemptions in accordance with this paragraph on and after the effective date of this section. This was, and I acknowledge that we might need to insert October 31st somewhere in here. Maybe we can do that on the floor. I think it is an extremely important part, and I missed it when I went through the conceptual thing with LSO, and it was the addition on this amendment. But the point here, I think, is extremely important, which is that the exemption period will be reopened for businesses that we heard testimony that we're denying religious exemptions. We're going to say here that they shall issue it. So we should reopen it when it hasn't gone into effect. And the medical exemption issue too, which if it wasn't handled properly, which if we adopt B is our position, using Banner as one example, it could be other cases of it, that we're going to reopen that if it has not yet gone into effect by October 31. I do think this language may need some work, but I think what's in C is very important. And we do remove, Representative Bear's point, we do remove the requirement for a serologic test, which I think we're going to get into later, which is a separate thing. And I don't think was ever supposed to be part of this part, to require an antibody test to get a religious or medical exemption. Thank you.
Yeah, so Representative Gray, let me speak to that point. That's correct. It was not to be a condition of the other exemptions. What it was supposed to be is a placeholder, as we heard lots of discussion today, to allow the natural immunity as an exemption as well. And so I'm trying to figure out on this structure how we're able to do that. So I think what we can do right now is discuss your amendment, which again is lines 12 through 35. Okay. And then we could just continue to work from there. Okay. Committee, any questions?
I'm assuming that there's no provision for natural immunity in these words here. Is that the correct understanding of this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Bear, no, my understanding was you were going to cover that. So I left that to your amendment, and I think you do. So this is a totally separate thing. I think we should separate those paragraphs because you get too many concepts. I was talking with Chairman Greer. I want to make sure we've worked a lot on this, that we don't pass a bill that a corporation may say doesn't apply to them, or it just gets too complex. And I just think we should have separate things. I think natural immunity should be a separate paragraph.
So what I'm believing, and I think I'm correct on this. So you've got Romanet 2, A is religious exemption. B is a medical exemption. C deals with reopening the application for those exemptions. D quite possibly could be language of submission, or it should be, and I'm looking at this, but D could be added, which would be is the employee shows evidence of having or the employee submitting, or an exemption for an employee submitting a positive antibody test. I'm trying to think of the structure of this law is what I'm trying to do.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
I'd like to make a suggestion because
sure,
C is sort of a different animal.
Yep.
And so I would recommend renumbering that to D and making the natural immunity exemption as item C. And for verbiage, if I may.
Yeah, let's go ahead and then we can do it as an amendment to the amendment. We don't take. Okay, I'm listening. Go ahead.
So verbiage for a standalone natural immunity piece.
So you're saying proof of a positive COVID-19 antibody test.
Well, here's the verbiage that I would use for what would now be item C. And this is from House Bill 1005, bottom of page 2.
Okay.
If any employer requires vaccination for COVID-19 or enforces a COVID-19 vaccination requirement imposed by the federal government or any other entity, the employer shall grant an exemption as provided in this subsection. Exemption shall be granted by the employer upon submission of written evidence. We probably don't need any of that wording.
Right.
We go to page 3, where it says medical contraindication to the administration of the COVID-19 vaccine or written evidence that the employee is fully recovered from a COVID-19 infection. So
Okay.
simply the language.
So, okay. So just go just that last part. So,
Okay. So medical
Yep.
contraindication to the administration of the COVID-19 vaccine or written evidence that the employee is fully recovered from a COVID-19 infection. And that verbiage can be found on House Bill 1005, page 2, the last word medical, through page 3, line 3.
Oh, boy, I butchered the spelling of that word.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may make another suggestion.
Okay, yeah, we're being a little informal as we try to, I'll formulate this back around for us.
So just to keep the verbiage the same for items A, B, C, and now D, this C item, we would begin with an employer shall grant an exemption for, and then that verbiage that I shared with you.
Yep. Okay, committee, I've got this. Cindy, we'll
I don't have.
Representative Duncan, I'll hang around. This passes and make sure we get it. So here's what we have. We have a motion with a second and some discussion from Representative Gray looking at the amendment 5702, lines 12 through 35. Okay, I think we understand that. There is an amendment to the amendment by Representative Bear, which would be to insert a new C, renumber C as D. The new C would read, employer shall grant an exemption, okay, for, insert, employer shall grant an exception for medical contraindication. Am I saying that right?
Contraindication.
Contraindication to the administration of the COVID-19 vaccine or written evidence that the employee is fully recovered from a COVID-19 infection. Do you find that as a friendly amendment, Representative Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do, but I do have one change to Romanet 2 because we got to take some wording out to make this work. I think we need to take out in line 17 of the amendment of an objection, line 17 going to 18, the last word of line 17 of, and going on to line 18, I think we need to take out an objection on medical or religious grounds. So Romanet 2, if we're going to do it this way, which I'm fine with, Romanet 2 would read, the employer provides and accepts exemptions to the requirement or mandate upon submission of written evidence in accordance with the following. If we're going to add that C, I think we need to take out.
I think that's good. Yeah. Would you consider that part of your, okay, so you consider that friendly amendment?
Yes,
Representative Gray?
yes.
Okay, committee of following along? Okay,
So, sorry, did we take out the word objection?
say that?
Apologies. Okay.
That's right, go ahead.
So is it the employer provides and accepts exemptions to the requirement or mandate upon submission of written evidence of and objections in accordance with the following?
So it'd be written evidence
Okay, and-
in accordance with the following.
Thank you.
Okay, we all understand what we're voting on? Okay. All right, so the amendment is amended, friendly amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Sorry, my hearing's terrible. 3, 4, 5, opposed? Okay, the amendment's adopted. Okay. Then Representative Bear, we do not need on your amendment on page 1, anything from 26 to 37. Is that correct?
Let me check line, page 6, line 2.
I think we just dealt with that.
Yep, I think we're good.
Okay, all right. So then, okay, so then moving on to page 6. Okay, line 15. Okay, go ahead, Representative Bear.
Okay, in this particular case, we're after the word public, we're inserting, we're deleting the balance of that line. Let's see, this, what this does is this makes this particularly difficult to define situation of undue burden on the employer. We're taking that verbiage out of there. I believe it's going to be far too difficult to prove that that's an undue burden on the
Just
employer.
get is there a second on that amendment?
Second.
Second by Gray. Okay, go ahead.
So I move that. I move, this is lines 1 through 5 of 3101 to House Bill 1001. And basically, we're just removing this verbiage where it says reassignment of work, duties, or workstations shall only be required if the reassignment does not impose an undue burden on the employer.
Any discussion? Yeah, go ahead, Representative Bear.
I think we need to be careful that we're not imposing too much of a burden on employers. And I think by removing that, we may be, I think we should leave it in. I know it's somewhat ambiguous, but I think it's still needed.
Yep. I too, and again, and I welcome all the amendments and appreciate the amendments. As an employer, when we talk in the field of discrimination, you're able to make reasonable accommodations, and they are reasonable accommodations. And sometimes as an employer, you find an accommodation that might be required is so onerous or so unreasonable as to not be economical. So I have concerns with removing that myself, but so I'll let any further debate on the issue be fine. So yeah, Representative Hunter, you got it.
Chairman, my concern as I read through this.
Oh, go ahead and use your mic, Representative Hunter. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern as I read through this paragraph is if someone needs to be moved to another location because of the exemption, could that be a de facto demotion? Could they be moved to a spot where they would actually lose wages or be demoted? And this legislation be used to facilitate that demotion?
Yeah. So I can't speak to that with respect to this legislation. I speak to it with respect to dealing with, say an ADA claim, for example, is if you reassign somebody, you don't, and so my business has a CBA. I mean, it's a unionized business. If I took somebody, from the lab and moved them to the filter floor, for example, I couldn't lower their wages. They'd have to stay at the same wage. I don't know if that's crystal clear in this legislation. I just know that's the strong argument with it. Which may be something to look at as the bills work further, is that without a diminution in compensation. Maybe language to be added. So, okay. All right. Sensing all those in favor of that amendment, which is on the Bear amendment, page 2, lines 1 and 3. Yeah, it's on page 6 of the bill regarding the undue burden. So all the in favor of the Bear amendment say aye. Those opposed say no. No. Okay, that amendment's failed. Okay, so I got page 6, lines 16 through. Yeah, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. So I've got to do that. I'm sorry. So that amendment would be lines 1 through 6. Sorry. Okay, so the next one is the penalty. Uh, Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Page 7, yeah, lines 1 through 3. It's the amendment 5702, lines 1 through 2. It's that 60-day issue, that placeholder.
Oh,
there.
yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead, make your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move lines 1 through 2 of page 2 of amendment 5702 for discussion.
Okay, is there a second? Yep, second. Okay, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate, you emphasize that these are placeholders. We talked about that. And so I wanted to have the discussion about having that at 120 days. It's a policy choice. Was just curious why we ended at the 60. And, I think that, anyway, I just thought 120. So was curious what the thoughts were on that. So thank you.
Again, I'll just say that the 60 days was a push the pause button on this. And there's nothing magic about it. It's, again, as I said to begin with, was a placeholder that's subject to amendment. So while you ask me a question, let me throw the question back to you. Why 120 days versus 60 days?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I like about it is that it allows us to put a pause until the budget session so that we can reevaluate in the budget session. And it just puts a pause until the budget session. I like that as policy.
Okay. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So basically, there's there's one in particular that testified today, and they started talking about and issued their potential mandate back in July. So their employees have been notified since July of what, potentially is happening. We have another entity that is putting in a potential mandate due to the Fed rules in December 8th. So I'm not sure that 120 days is, I would, if we're going to do anything, I prefer the 60, but I would prefer the suggested amendment that was given earlier. But I don't feel that we need to push this further into 120 days versus 60 days because they've already been notified well in advance.
I do recall, Representative Gray, committee members, a little bit of our discussion was also just to see what would come out of OSHA for rules, to see what actually might happen or be there. That was the reason for the pause, is to see what would happen from the federal government. I think that's where the 60-day timeframe came from. Interestingly enough, SIM shot came out, so they're not going to be subject to a mandate. What the heck? How come coal miners are different than sugar workers? Huh? Representative Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, and it relates to the same things Representative Duncan just said. What happens to those mandates that are currently in place already?
They are not affected by this law. Okay. So, and I should say this is the law's design, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but the law is designed for employees that have lost their employment is the effect of a mandate after October 31. So those that have lost their job or got vaccinated or already quit or moved on, we can't help them. Can, but it ain't gonna work. Okay, so the amendment before us is to move the 60-day pause period to 120. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Let's go with a show of hands on that one. All those in favor, raise your hand. And 2 opposed. Okay, so Yeah, I'm not taking any more testimony. He can catch me later. Okay, so that amendment, so page 2 of the Gray amendment, lines 1 through 2, was not adopted. Okay. Now, okay, lines, okay, page 7, line 7. Okay, go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move page 2, line 4 of Amendment 5702, which deals with page 7, line 7. And if we could second for discussion.
Second, anybody? Second. Okay, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is in the box of clarity, and one of my concerns in this bill is that, you know, we do want to make sure Banner was a huge part of the discussion on this session, and there are a couple other mandates going into effect October 31 and November 1st. And I'm a little concerned the way this is worded. I want to make sure it keys in mandates that have already been issued but do not take effect until October 31st or after. So I just added the language that takes effect on page 7, line 7 after the word employment. And I think it's good clarity, and I think it's a good amount. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on that point? Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That amendment is adopted. Okay, page 7, line 11. Okay. $100 was a placeholder. 1,000 or 5,000 or 100. Representative Bear.
Just a point of clarity on this Amendment 5702. The verbiage says $1,100. So if we could get some clarification on that from the bringer.
Representative Gray, was it 1,000 or $1,100?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that is an error, and I'm not intending, I think Representative Bear, I'm happy to have him move his amendment on this area.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, okay, we'll go ahead and go with Representative Bear, see where that goes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Amendment House Bill or Amendment H3 101 to House Bill 1001. This will be line 7 of page 2, 7 and 8. And in this particular case, we're inserting the word $5,000. Get to that page. After the word penalty of on line 11 of page 7. We're doing $5,000 plus an additional $100 per day. So the fine would be $5,000 plus $100 per day.
So I'm sorry, say that last comment again.
So it would read an unfair employment practice and shall be subject to a civil penalty of $5,000 plus an additional $100 per day.
Okay.
For each day.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Okay. So the initial, it's the first $5,000 and then it's $100 a day after.
Yes, sir. I'm keeping your placeholder of $100 per day and just adding a flat $5,000.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Representative Duncan.
I appreciate what the bringer of the amendments are trying to do. However, this is going to kill small business. I mean, put someone out of business. $5,000 plus $100 a day. I mean, that's anti-business. I just don't get why we're penalizing to that severity. They're already having to submit written documentation to workforce services. They're already having to make accommodations and all of this. And they're also having to pay for testing and all these extra accommodations. So now we're also going to penalize them at $5,000 plus $100 a day. So I'm adamantly opposed to this as a small business owner.
Further discussion? Go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge an aye vote on this amendment. I think, and I understand what Representative Vice Chairman Duncan is saying, but I think that they only have to issue it once for it to change somebody's life and for someone have to make this decision. So if it were issued for one day and it's a $100 penalty and your Banner Health, I'm concerned about it not being enough of a disincentive. So I'm going to vote aye on this amendment. I still think these are levels that I think we've got to have a disincentive. We gotta have a penalty that has some beef here. Understand what Vice Chairman Duncan's saying, but I'm going to vote aye. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. I just have a general question of where do we envision these penalties going, this money going?
So, I'm sorry. Say that again.
So the proposed penalties that businesses will pay, where does that money go?
It goes into the same with any fine or penalty you get by discrimination or wage and labor claims that Workforce Services will levy. So yeah, it's been a long time since I was on appropriations, but there's an account. I mean, we could donate it to the Humane Society.
Follow-up question. I mean, 5,000, again, with Representative Duncan seems extreme for some of our small businesses. So yeah, I don't think that there's a lot of logic to that. And then not really knowing where that money goes or what it does, or, if it helps with education or testing or just concerned.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I can't give you a clear answer on that. Representative Bear, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify the Vice Chairman. I understand her concern about these costs, especially the other costs that may be involved with this type of statute. But again, I want to read what it is we're talking about here. This is a fine that is levied when someone is non-compliant. It's not the same as meeting compliance by providing testing and other things. So as I read this, it says an employer who first requires or mandates employees to receive a COVID-19 vaccine as a condition of employment with our amendment that takes effect on or after October 31st of 2021 and whose requirement or mandate does not conform to the requirements of subsection A. In other words, this statute. So this is what this fine is about. It's about not conforming. So this is putting the teeth into this bill. You can have teeth of $100 a day, or you can have teeth of $5,000 plus $100 a day.
Representative West.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly appreciate they're wanting to have teeth in this bill, but I mean, let's just run some quick math. So $5,000 plus $100 a day, it's $1,000 every 10 days. That's $3,000 a month. That's a pretty serious burden on a small business. And I look at someone like myself. I have an employee, that W-2 employee that I pay workers' comp, unemployment, all that stuff. If all of a sudden I have to pay $3,000 a month for an undetermined amount of time, that doesn't put me in the red, but it puts me real close. And so that's why I have concerns with this amendment.
You get a higher rate of return. Go ahead, Representative Bear.
Again, this is about compliance. So if you're worried about your bottom line, comply with the bill.
Okay. All right. Sensing we're ready to vote, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Still raise your hands on this. All in favor, raise your hand. 4, all those opposed. Okay, that amendment's not adopted. Okay, Gray, do you want to, our Representative Gray, do you want to punt on your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to strike that out. Okay, let me do something here on page 10. And this had troubled me from the get-go, and forgive me, but I'm going to move that we strike on page 10, line 4, all the way over on page 11, to line 2. If I can get a second, I'll explain it. Okay. The reason I have problems with this is, and I'm far enough removed from this that I may not get this correct. But how workers' comp rates are charged to the employer may cause employers who don't have mandates to pick up the costs associated with those. And I understand, it was 4 or 5 years ago, it was reworked in a way, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but that employers that have a lot of injuries, those, a lot of frequent injuries which show workplace issues, get charged more of their costs, where those with one large claim are more spread out over the pool for that industry. And my concern with this language, and again, this was put in there to cover all the ideas that were brought forward, but my concern is that an employer who has to pick this up on their work comp coverage could negatively affect the workers' comp rates of other people within their industry. So that's why I'm looking at striking that now after, and then we've also heard some testimony from that they didn't like the language as well. Okay. Question being called. All those in favor of that amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Question really quick.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask you about that. I understand removing that portion, but I think what the intent might have been was to get to this liability piece that we've talked about actually for 2 or 3 months, and now it's totally out of the bill. And so I asked the chairman, I know we've got a couple other pieces of legislation with some of that floating, but I think one of them actually we're probably not moving. And so should we try to work in some liability language into this bill?
Well, so my feeling on this is we've got penalty as light as it is, and I'm sure that we're not done discussing or debating that particular penalty. We also have the severance language for compensation back to employees. Keep in mind, all the amendments that we're doing right here are all going to be subject to a majority vote on the House floor as well. I don't disagree with your comment concerning the liability component of it. I just don't think work comp is the proper way to do that. So what I'm saying is you might be right and you're not being difficult. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's go Representative Bear and then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the same sentiment, so I won't repeat that. But one of the things that happened in the special session of 2020 is liability protection was provided to corporations. And one of the items in House Bill 1005 is just removing that particular protection that was only provided for COVID-19 for companies that would mandate this vaccine. So I would just recommend if we did approach the liability piece, and I would certainly encourage us to do that, to just insert the language from page 5 of House Bill 1005.
But can we bring that as an amendment later in the process?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just scrambling my brain on how I get this put together for. So, well, I'll be the first one to tell you is that liability protection I fought and lost. So I've never been a fan of that. But anyway. Okay. Okay, so line 11, I do want to section 4. And I suspect, so this is another pot of funds in here for healthcare shortage relief and worker incentive program. And again, what Representative Larson had told me is that there were $20 million in a pot that is there, a stipend for hospitals. It's already available. We'd be creating another pot with this section 4. I'm fine taking that to the floor and discussing it. I'm also fine with striking it. I just wanted to point that out to the committee. Well then, Representative Duncan.
Mr. Chairman, I would move striking section 4 in its entirety, starting on page 11, line 4, through to page 13, line 14.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. Now, for discussion, I would maybe consider a friendly amendment, or wait a minute. No, that's correct. I'm sorry. Yeah. Any further discussion on striking that the healthcare shortage relief and worker incentive program from this bill? Well, seems how you're the chairman of appropriations and this information came to me secondhand. And because you are probably at least the third best cook in Cheyenne, I'll afford you that opportunity, Representative Nicholas.
I just want to tell you what we found out. about
Yeah,
this today.
please do. Yeah, go ahead into the microphone.
So because we had the same question. So we had the Director of Health, Stefan Johansson, came and walked through this with us, as well as the Rennie McKay from the governor's office to explain what they were doing and how they were doing and how much they were doing it. And what they told us was that it wasn't 20 million, it was 30 million they made it in the pots. That was just recently made available. And of that, 20 million was meant to go to specifically for wage enhancement for nursing and for care staff, 10 million for the travelers nurses. So they kind of broke it up. But if you combine that to what they've previously done, they've already given more than 60 million for this particular type of project. And what they also told us was, and Mr. McKay told us this yesterday as well, that in the effect, if this money runs out, if they run out of the 30 million, then they will, and they're still in need, they will go back into the ARPA funds, take a B11 and continue to pay it out. So they believe that they have all of these issues covered. They also told us that the Department of Health has already established a formula on how you pay out to each healthcare provider, to the employer. And it's based upon number of beds, it's based upon number of patients. And so it goes into a formula. So that addresses the 1.5 million cap. And they think that that's a better way than doing it than just putting the cap on it. And so if any other questions about it, I'd be happy to do it. But that's, and as a result of that, by the way, we stripped the money out of it in JAC in appropriations.
Well, Chairman Nicholas, and I'm violating my own rules, but that's good information because, yeah, so I think that justifies the motion before us.
And just to follow up on your workers' comp question, since I'm here and I know the answer to it, the way that this is currently written, if you mandate a vaccine, and it's your work performance, then that is a compensable injury and it would be covered under workers' comp.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we're cleaning this up just a touch with that. Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you, Chairman Nicholas. Appreciate it. All those, okay, sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of striking section 4, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment has been adopted. It's all the way over to, okay. That finishes your amendments, Representative Bear. Okay, so. All right, so then, so that means that my amendment on page 12 is now irrelevant. So I need to worry about that. So now, okay, so line 14, excuse me, page 14, line 9. This is a reimbursement to any business for testing materials. And so this was sent, just a little history. Okay, let me move this amendment 2701. So I can, okay, it's been seconded. When we were working this bill initially, Senator Hicks and I were going back and forth, and we're running short on time. I think you all can appreciate that. This date was the October 2024, which is when the ARPA funds run out. And Senator Hicks said, hey, we need to move this date. It was a bit of a confusion. This would be a scenario wherein, so this say federal mandate comes down for OSHA and you don't issue the vaccine, but your alternative is for testing. This would be a pool of money to help employers get reimbursed for those testing expenses. So it just helps lessen that burden. And I think it would be appropriate rather than March 31, 2022, and have to readdress it or re-extend during the budget sessions, just go ahead and run it out to the end of the ARPA funds. That's what the amendment does. Any further discussion on that? Okay, question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that amendment has been adopted. It's October 1, 2024. Okay. All right, so we're getting close. Representative Gray, line 5. Okay, page 15, line 6. And go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm deciding whether to move these separately or at the same time, but okay, I'm going to move lines 10 through 12 on page 2 of Amendment 5702.
10, so, okay, 10 through 12.
Yeah.
So you're going to delete a bill. Okay, got it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, on the amendment, he's going to delete, or he is.
On the amendment.
Yeah, 10 through 12, which is affecting as a deletion on lines 6 and 7, page 15. Yep. Okay, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that amendment.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it somewhat interacts with the next one, but they're somewhat different things. I think having the governor certify that this is happening, that the federal government is preempted, is problematic on a number of for a number of reasons, and it interacts with the next amendment as well. What happens if the state of Wyoming is not a signatory to the ultimate federal litigation that becomes the main one flowing through the federal court system? The way this is worded, one, it gives the governor discretion, which I have an issue with. I mean, it's pretty clear, especially with the next amendment, what this is supposed to do. Why should the governor have discretion to say, hey, all of our litigation, all of the country's litigation has been exhausted? And what it does, it's very unclear, because in the state of Wyoming, of course, the attorney general works at the pleasure of the governor. And it almost makes it sound like the intent of this, I think, is very clear, that it's any litigation, making sure that any litigation is exhausted through the federal court system. So if the state of Louisiana files a lawsuit and that ends up being the vehicle that goes to the federal court system, and there's a nationwide stay, and that's the one ultimately going through the Supreme Court, let's say Wyoming's not a signatory on that. And oftentimes as litigation moves through the federal courts, we are not signatories to many state actions. To me, the way this language is, the governor could certify that all Wyoming litigation has been exhausted. And I take issue with that. I think the intent of this, and it goes along with the next amendment, is that it's any challenge working its way through the federal court system. So if the state of Louisiana has a nationwide stay and they're trying to move it through the Supreme Court, and that stay might be lifted, the governor couldn't just come in and say, hey, all Wyoming litigation has been exhausted. So I think we need to remove this certification. I don't think this is good practice in Wyoming statute.
Okay, any discussion, committee? Okay, so Representative Gray, my question And in light of what I'm assuming is the next amendment is, this talks about any challenge. So to me, any challenge is anything that's in existence. The question is, as an employer, how do you get to a point of certainty with that? And that's all I'm looking at. I'll just say 18 months of uncertainty as an employer is driving me insane. So that's my question on that.
Mr. Chairman, I think the certainty comes when all litigation has made its way through the federal court system, which I don't think there's much question about when that would occur. I mean, the intent of this, as I understood it, is that it's any litigation. So,
right.
I mean, obviously, if you have the Supreme Court decline cert on the state of Louisiana's action, everything else is going to fail, right? And I think that's kind of obvious. I think a court would be interpreting this. I don't see us doing this in statute that often, where you have an officer of the executive branch certifying what is clear in statute. And I know it might happen sometimes. I don't think it's good practice, and I don't think it's needed in this. And there's a question here. So what if the governor decides, hey, I'm just going to issue this, and the state of Louisiana's petition is still making its way through the federal court system? Well, then you actually have uncertainty. And I mean, the pure language is that we should be waiting until this has made its way through. But the governor has decided, well, I think we should execute this provision of the statute. And then you do have uncertainty.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Any further discussion? Yep.
It is clear as mud for me. Mr. Chairman, I was sort of following along with this, like, yeah, let's take the governor out of the equation. But then when I look at the next piece of it, the word any is way too broad for me. And I do think it creates a lot of uncertainty. So it's clear as mud.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What's your question, Representative Bear? Yes, the motion the motion before us is the governor certifying to the Secretary of State that all challenges have been exhausted. That's the motion before us. Okay. Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, and motion is adopted. Representative Gray, you convinced me.
Thank you.
Write
Mr.
that
Chairman.
down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I move lines 14 through 20 of page 2 of Amendment 5702.
So, okay, so this is page 15, line 8. So this is an insertion.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the
Oh,
amendment.
is there a second?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This clarifies that for purposes of this paragraph, any challenge to the federal law, regulation, rule, or standard includes any challenge filed by any state or United States territory or any person or entity in any state or United States territory. Now, I know the last clause there, the any person or entity, is probably going to make some people nervous. However, the reality is if the state vehicle fails, all of the other vehicles are going to fail. Now, I think if someone wants to make a friendly amendment, maybe we should, because I think it's going to make people nervous. I think my main thing is any state or United States territory, because I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a ton of states file litigation if the federal mandate comes into place. I don't think a lot of states are going to sign on, or the state of Wyoming is not necessarily going to sign on to the vehicle that ends up going through. And I want to make sure that it is any state vehicle, because if that's the one the Supreme Court is going to hear, we should not be in limbo and have the mandate go into effect. So maybe we should remove or any person or entity, but I think this is pretty important, at least the first section. And I don't think the second section, I know it's going to probably cause heartburn. I don't think it does what some people are concerned that it does, but maybe Chairman Greer can weigh in.
Okay. So Representative Gray, I agree. We would need to remove any person or entity. And then I would also say in any state or United States territory and just because this is all going to be handled in the federal courts. And so this would be my concern getting back to certainty is I could go file a lawsuit in a state court pretty quick because I still got my license. I could just go file it and then preserve things with that. So I think we need to, if we're going to go forward, we really should have an amendment to remove or any person or entity. And then I would, says in any state or United States territory. I don't know. I would just strike all of that and just leave that alone. Just period after territory. Would you? I guess I'll do that as an amendment to the amendment, Representative Gray.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Did you follow me, Representative Western? You had that look on your face.
Let's say or filed in the United States federal court, but it's kind of semantics at that point.
Okay, why don't we say that? Filed by any state or United States territory in a U.S. federal court? What would you say? What you said sounded better. What'd you say?
I said filed in a U.S. federal court.
Okay.
Filed in a United States federal court.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Then that makes it clear. Are you good with that, Representative Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I accept also that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so folks, with the friendly amendment, is that good with the second? Okay. So what we would do is we're looking at the gray, I'm just called the gray amendment on page 2, lines 14 through 20. As we move down to line 18, it says state, territory, and then it would say filed in a U.S. federal court, period. The rest of line 18 is struck, all of line 19 is struck. We clear on that? Okay. Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion, that amendment is adopted. Okay, Representative Gray, line 15 or page 15, line 10 is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the patience of the committee here. I move, we are getting close to the end here. I move on page 2 of Amendment 5702, lines 21 through 22 on page 2.
Okay. Is there a second? Is there a second? Second by Bear. Discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the sunset, the second part of the sunset, which would move it back to March the 2nd. And again, there's the sunset where if a federal mandate went into effect, it would sunset. I say that. Anyway, this other one though that triggers is this date. And right now it reads March 31, 2022. And I just don't like this as a policy. So I understand what this is trying to do. This is saying, well, we're going to come back in the budget session and pass a whole new statute. But to me, after all this work we've done, it should be the other way around, which is that there should be a statute to amend this, or if someone wants to eliminate it, we shouldn't have to go back through. I think it should be the other way around. And so, I mean, honestly, I was thinking of just eliminating this section. I did it 2023. I don't know, I'm somewhat regretting that decision, but maybe you want to do a friendly amendment. But
I'm just telling you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, I'm sure we're going to be talking about COVID 10 years from now. So yeah.
I just think it doesn't make sense for us to bring through this whole bill again automatically in the budget session. And someone can amend it or do what they want.
So March 31st, 2023 gets us to the next general session. So I think you're fine. Any further discussion, committee? Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Representative Ayer, that amendment was adopted. I happen to like Representative Ayer, so I pick on it. Okay. Representative Gray. One
okay,
more?
Mr. Chairman, it's the last one. I move lines 23 to lines 29 of page 2 of Amendment 5702. House Bill 1001.
Is there second by Bear? Go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is basically the same concept we talked about earlier, which is clarifying that this applies to mandates that have been issued but have not gone into effect yet on or after October 31. So the language would be the provisions of this act regulating employer COVID-19 vaccine mandates shall apply only to employers that require a mandate that their employees receive a COVID-19 vaccination as a condition of employment that takes effect on and after October 31st, 2021, and to employers who have issued a COVID-19 vaccine mandate or requirement before October 31, 2021, but that takes effect on or after October 31, 2021. And I realize it's long, but it is very clear. And we're doing a lot of work. I just want to make sure we're very clear on this. And I think it's the intent of the bill. So thank you.
Representative Bear.
This may be splitting hairs, but this takes effect, the definition of takes effect. Is there any ambiguity there? Because I could see someone saying that takes effect is from the date that it was announced. Someone could say it takes effect when an employee has to be in compliance. There's a couple of different places where somebody could say it takes effect. Am I misinterpreting that?
Mr. Chairman, I certainly think it's clearer than the current language. If you have ideas on how to make it even clearer, but I talked about this quite a few times around and we already passed amendment. I mean, I think this at least makes it clear. And if anyone has ideas to make it even more crystal clearer, I'm open to that.
Yeah, this particular section troubled me to the same degree. I felt as drafted that it would cover the scenario, but I agree it could be clearer. And I do think this new language does make it clearer. And so I agree. I think it is clear with the amendment in it. So, yeah. Okay. Question being called. There's no further discussion. Okay. Question. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed? That amendment is adopted. Okay. Committee, are there any further amendments? Okay. All right. So you got to help me, Representative, if they go into things we've amended. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, they do not.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative Western.
So, Mr. Chairman, the one I'm looking at, a couple, one of them though is page 5, section 2, amendment I, which we have not amended out yet.
Hold on. Let me make sure that that's
at least by my tracking.
okay. You're correct. That has not been touched. Okay. You didn't feel like doing this when we were going through the bill at that time?
Well, here we are.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Well, we spent the last couple hours going through one member's amendment. Let's just keep the ball rolling.
Make your
So,
motion.
My concern is that
No, make your motion.
the motion is the amendment that's, what's this, broadly speaking? The end of line 15, after workplace, put a comma and insert or would otherwise jeopardize the business, comma.
Okay. Is there a second for discussion purposes? Seconded by Duncan. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the rationale here is that there is a business in Sheridan that has over 100 employees that's up in the business park. I think we can use names, correct?
Yeah, we do. We do
So-
in committee. Sure.
So Keenan Designs employs it's like 110-ish employees or somewhere around there. It's over 100. And half the revenue comes from contracts to the Department of Defense. They make this special fabric that goes on, jets and stuff like that. Their CEO called me a couple days ago and he's really concerned. He said, Cyrus, I don't like mandates, but the reality is I am not interested in being in a place where I can get kind of double whacked by the feds and the state. So my reasoning for this language is that this ensures that he will not have the state come after him as well. Because the reality is, I feel that my wording does a good job of covering him because, well, if half your revenue comes from federal contracts, I think that would be something that would be jeopardize the status of their business. So that's why I insert that language.
Okay. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Representative Gray.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be voting no on this. I think it's already covered by the mandate language. I mean, I think that if there were a mandate on federal contracts, they could just cite the preemption area. And I think that's so broad that I think it could be cited by almost anybody. And so I think it really, really weakens the bill. So I'm going to be voting no.
Okay, I'm going to comment on this. I actually like the amendment, and I don't think it weakens the bill because what I think we do here is we provide a vehicle that allows an employer to have a mandate, but by state law, we specify the exemptions that preserve the rights of our citizens. And so if I have a federal contract coming in, I can then point to the state statute and say, okay, I do have a mandate, but I'm following my state law, and they have some strength to make an argument that they still can apply for that contract. And I think it's business friendly without diminishing the bill and is sensitive to something that is a huge concern by our private employers. So I would, that's my view on that and something for us to think about. Okay, no further discussion. Okay, question being called. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that will be adopted. Okay, Representative Western, you've got more?
Mr. Chairman, the hour is late and I will withdraw.
A smart man knows to quit when he's ahead. Okay, I'm going to be an hour making sure we get this to LSO tonight. So any further discussion on the bill? Committee, good work. We'll deal with this one and then we'll move on to those. Okay. All right, since we're ready to vote, so we'll be voting on House Bill 1001, question being called. House Bill 1001 is amended by the committee. Roll call vote is necessary. Please proceed.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
He's excused.
Representative Duncan,
Aye.
Representative Air, Representative Gray,
Aye.
Representative Heiner, Representative Sherwood,
No.
Representative Western, Chairman Greer.
Aye.
We have 7 ayes, 1 no, 1 excused.
Okay, recommended do pass. We'll take this to the House floor. I will to get my intent is this goes into one standing committee amendment is to have that divided out. And I'll try to get those divisions penciled into the committee in the morning. And then we'll expect the committee members who brought some of these amendments to defend them on the House floor. So, okay. With that, the chair would entertain a motion to table House Bill 105. Moved by Air, seconded by Western. All those in favor say aye. Okay, House Bill 105 will be tabled. Now we'll get to do something we don't always get to do. House Bill 109 being the speaker's bill. The chair would entertain a motion to table that. Okay, motion by Representative Heiner. Is there a second? Second. Sure. Well, Representative Sherwood, did you want to second it?
Sure.
Okay, seconded by Sherwood. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Okay, House Bill 1009 will be tabled. Good work, committee. We'll get this to the floor. I expect us to have a good debate. There's lots of opportunities for this to be refined as we work through the process, having the discussion that we need to have. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.